Psychedelics are drugs that can change how you see the world. I already made the part 1 of this Iceberg. This is part 2, but it's going to be great. You don't need to watch part 1 to watch this, but if you want more, go watch part 1. If anything, this video is going to be a lot darker, deeper, and more interesting. But the first one's still pretty good. Now, I'm trying to hit 100K by the end of the year, which I think we can do. So please subscribe, it helps me out like a lot, it really means a lot. Check out my Instagram, I have a Discord server, I have a Minecraft server now, let's just get straight into this. Starting out with Operation Midnight Climax. Operation Midnight Climax was one of the more bizarre and ethically dubious experiments conducted by the CIA during the Cold War. It was part of the larger MKUltra program, which aimed to investigate and develop methods of mind control. The idea behind MKUltra was to see if techniques like hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and most notoriously the use of drugs like LSD could be used to control or extract information from people. Operation Midnight Climax took place in the 1950s and the early 1960s. The setup was straight out of a noir detective novel. The CIA established safe houses in San Francisco and New York City. These locations were essentially brothels where, workers of the night, under the direction of the CIA, would lure unsuspecting men. Once inside, the men were secretly dosed with LSD and their interactions were observed and recorded through one-way mirrors. The workers were instructed to coax information out of these drugged men to see if they could be manipulated into revealing secrets. By the way, right now is as good a time as any for me to say that I am not condoning any behavior via this video. Drugs are bad for you, you should not be doing drugs. And if the YouTube bot is watching, this video is purely educational, purely informative. My last one got demonetized, so I'm kind of expecting this one to get demonetized too. Because, YouTube is dumb. I mean, it shouldn't be. This is purely educational. I'm not saying you should do anything bad or illegal. But anyways, let's get back into Operation Midnight Climax. So the purpose of this was to study the effects of LSD on unwitting subjects and explore its potential use in interrogation or even mind control. The agents involved in these experiments were often operating with minimal oversight and took a rather cavalier approach to the whole operation. The men who were dosed had no idea that they were even part of an experiment, and they certainly didn't consent to it. The ethical implications are staggering. Imagine being out for a night on the town, meeting someone, and then suddenly you're finding yourself in a surreal and terrifying situation, hallucinating and completely unaware of what was happening. The CIA was essentially experimenting on American citizens without their knowledge or consent. This raises pretty serious questions about human rights and government overreach. The man behind much of Operation Midnight Climax was George Hunter White, an officer in the Federal Bureau of Narcotics who was on loan to the CIA. White was known for his hard-drinking, rough-and-tumble approach to law enforcement, and he brought that same attitude to these experiments. He kept detailed diaries of his work, which later provided a window into these secret operations. The whole affair came to light in the 1970s when investigative journalists and congressional hearings started to uncover the extent of MKUltra and its various sub-projects. The revelations were shocking to the public and led to widespread condemnation and calls for greater oversight of intelligence activities. Many of the documents related to MKUltra were destroyed on the orders of then CIA Director Richard Helms, making it difficult to piece together the full scope of the program. However, what we do know paints a disturbing picture of a government willing to cross ethical lines in the name of national security. Alright, next up we have Kykeon. Kykeon is a fascinating part of ancient Greek culture, especially in the context of its potential use as a psychedelic substance. To understand Kykeon, we need to delve into the Eleusinian mysteries, which were highly secretive religious rites held annually in honor of goddesses Demeter and Pharisphone. These rites were celebrated in the town of Eleusis near Athens and were considered one of the most important spiritual events in ancient Greece. Kykeon itself was a drink consumed by the initiates during the Eleusinian mysteries. The exact ingredients of Kykeon are a bit of a mystery, much like the rites themselves, but it's generally believed to have been a mixture of water, barley, and something called kanna. However, some scholars and researchers have speculated that Kykeon might have contained psychoactive ingredients that induced a transformative, mystical experience in the participants. One of the most intriguing theories is that Kykeon contained ergot, a fungus that grows on barley and rye. Ergot contains compounds that are chemically similar to LSD. If ergot or an ergot-derived substance was indeed part of this Kykeon mixture, it could explain the profound and often ineffable experiences reported by those who underwent the Eleusinian mysteries. These experiences were said to bring about a deep understanding of life, death, and rebirth, aligning with the mythological themes of Demeter and Pharisphone. The effects of a psychedelic Kykeon would have been significant. Participants might have experienced vivid visions, altered perceptions of reality, and intense emotional states, all of which could be interpreted as divine revelations or spiritual epiphanies. This aligns with the reports of initiates who describe their experiences as life-changing and spiritually enlightening. Alright, next up we have reindeer urine. Okay, so picture this. We're in the icy, vast expanse of Siberia, where the indigenous people like the Evenki and the Sami have been living for generations. Life here is tough, the winters are long, and the landscape is dominated by snow and reindeer. The reindeer aren't just animals, they're central to the way of life here. They provide food, clothing, and even transportation. Now, here's where things get interesting. Among these reindeer herders, there's a very special kind of mushroom that grows in the wild. Amanita muscaria, or the fly agaric. You've probably seen pictures of it. Bright red caps with white spots, straight out of fairy tale. This mushroom has some serious mojo. It's known for its powerful psychoactive effects, but here's the catch. It's also pretty toxic if you just eat it straight. So how do you get the mystical, mind-bending experience without the nasty side effects? Enter the reindeer. These animals love to snack on Amanita muscaria, and here's the magic part. Their bodies process the mushroom, filtering out a lot of the toxins but keeping the hallucinogenic effects. When the reindeer pee, their urine is now laced with these psychoactive compounds, minus most of the bad stuff. The indigenous people figured this out a long time ago. Now, instead of chowing down on the mushrooms and risking a bad trip, they would drink the urine of the reindeer that had eaten the mushrooms. It might sound gross to us, but think about it, it's a pretty clever solution. This way they could safely get the psychoactive effects and use them in their shamanic rituals. Imagine a shaman drinking this reindeer urine and then embarking on a spiritual journey. They'd have vivid visions, feel a deep connection to the spirit world, and gain insights that they believed were crucial for their community. These experiences weren't just recreational, they were deeply spiritual and meaningful to them. But it didn't stop there either. People discovered that if someone drank the mushroom tea and then peed, others could drink their urine and experience the same effects. So, yeah. Alright, next up we got the idea that Santa was a shaman. So the idea that Santa Claus might be based on a psychedelic shaman is a pretty fascinating theory. So first off, we need to understand the figure of Santa Claus as we know him today. The jolly, red-suited, gift-giving man who flies with reindeer comes from a mix of various traditions, including the Dutch and the British, all layered on top of the historical Saint Nicholas, a 4th century Greek bishop known for his generosity. But here's where it gets interesting. Some people believe that Santa Claus has its roots in the shamanic traditions of the indigenous peoples of Siberia, particularly their use of the Amanita muscaria mushroom, the one that we were just talking about. So let's paint a picture. Imagine a Siberian shaman or a medicine man in his traditional garb. These shaman often wore red and white fur trimmed coats, similar to Santa's iconic outfit. In the dead of winter, they would go from yurt to yurt, bringing the gift of the Amanita muscaria mushroom, which was used in their rituals to induce altered states of consciousness. These mushrooms were believed to be a way to connect with the spirit world, bringing visions and guidance from beyond. The shamans would typically dry the mushrooms by hanging them in socks or stockings over the fire, a detail that might sound familiar. Now picture the reindeer again. In Siberian culture, the reindeer weren't just for transport. We just talked about they were often used to consume the psychedelic mushrooms. And also they would get the same effects, like the reindeer would prance about seemingly intoxicated. And then, they're prancing about so much, looking like majestic, this would tie into the idea of Santa's flying reindeer. Moreover, these shamans often entered homes through the smoke hole in the roof, akin to Santa coming down the chimney. Given the harsh winter conditions, this was somewhat the easiest way to enter a dwelling, especially when snow blocked the door. So I don't know, you tell me, what do you guys think in the comments? You think Santa could have been based on one of these guys? Alright, next up we got Hawaiian baby woodrose. Hawaiian baby woodrose, or Argyria nervosa, is a flowering vine native to the Indian subcontinent, but it's also found in Hawaii and other tropical regions. The plant is part of the morning glow family and produces large, heart-shaped leaves and beautiful trumpet-shaped flowers. However, it's not the flowers that are of interest here, but the seeds. The seeds of Hawaiian baby woodrose contain a compound called LSA, which is chemically similar to LSD. This makes them a natural source of a powerful psychedelic, and they've been used for this purpose by various cultures. Historically, the seeds were used in traditional medicine and spiritual practices. In Hawaii, they were known for their entheogenic properties, meaning that they were used to induce spiritual or mystical experiences. Shamans and healers might have used them to enter altered states of consciousness, facilitating communication with the spirit world or providing visions and insights. In more recent times, especially in the 1960s and 1970s, Hawaiian baby woodrose seeds gained popularity among those interested in psychedelics. People looking for a natural alternative to LSD began experimenting with the seeds. They discovered that consuming them could produce effects similar to those of LSD, though often less intense and with a different character. To use the seeds, people typically scrape off the outer coating, which can contain irritating compounds, and then either chew the seeds or grind them up and mix them into a drink. The effects of LSA can vary widely depending on the dose, the individual's body chemistry, and the mental state of the person doing it. Generally, users report experiencing altered perceptions of reality, enhanced colors and patterns, and a sense of connection to the universe or nature. The trip can last anywhere between 6 to 8 hours and often includes both visual and mental effects. Some users report profound spiritual insights and feelings of euphoria, while others might experience nausea, anxiety, or confusion. Because of this variability, it's always recommended to start with a low dose to gauge how your body reacts. Now, legally, the status of Hawaiian baby woodrose seeds vary. In many places, the seeds themselves are legal to buy and possess, but extracting or consuming LSA from them might be considered illegal, as LSA is a controlled substance in several countries. Therefore, it's always a good idea to check your local regulations before experimenting with these seeds. Alright, next up we got the Johnny Appleseed of LSD. This refers to a man named William Leonard Pickard. Pickard is a prominent figure in the world of psychedelics because of his involvement in the large-scale production and distribution of LSD. So, William Leonard Pickard was born in 1945, and he showed early promise as an academic. He attended prestigious institutions like Princeton University and the University of California, Berkeley, where he studied under some of the leading minds at the time. His academic background was impressive, and he became known for his research on psychedelics and their potential therapeutic uses. Pickard's involvement in the LSD scene began in the late 20th century when he became part of a clandestine network of chemists and distributors. He was not just any producer, he was responsible for manufacturing enormous quantities of high-quality LSD. His operations were sophisticated and widespread, earning him a reputation similar to that of Johnny Appleseed, the American pioneer who spread apple trees across the United States. In Pickard's case, however, it was LSD that he was distributing. The scale of Pickard's LSD production was staggering. At his peak, he was allegedly responsible for producing up to 90% of the world's supply of LSD. His labs were hidden in remote locations, and he employed advanced chemical techniques to ensure the purity and potency of his product. The sheer volume of LSD that he produced had a pretty significant impact on the psychedelic scene, influencing countless users and contributing to the spread of the drug's use. However, Pickard's story took a dramatic turn in 2000 when he was arrested in a high-profile bust. The authorities discovered a massive LSD laboratory in a decommissioned missile silo in Kansas, leading to Pickard's arrest along with his accomplice Clyde Apperson. The bust was one of the largest in history, and Pickard was sentenced to 2 life terms in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Pickard's arrest and conviction marked a significant moment in the history of psychedelic drugs. His operations had been so extensive that his downfall created a noticeable shortage of LSD on the streets. That's crazy. This in turn had a ripple effect on the psychedelic community, leading to increased prices and a decline in the availability of the drug. Despite his imprisonment though, Pickard remains a pretty controversial figure. Like, supporters argued that his work in producing LSD was rooted in a desire to explore and expand human consciousness, aligning with the broader goals of the psychedelic movement. Critics, on the other hand, view him as a criminal who contributed to the illegal drug trade. So yeah. Hunter S. Thompson. Hunter Thompson was one of those larger-than-life characters who lived as wildly as he wrote. Born in 1937 in Louisville, Kentucky, he wasn't your typical journalist. Instead of just observing, he dove headfirst into the chaos, making himself a part of the story. This fearless approach birthed what we now call gonzo journalism, where the writer becomes the main character in their own narrative. Thompson's most famous work, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, is a perfect example of this. Imagine setting off on a road trip to Las Vegas with a trunk full of drugs and a friend who's just as crazy as you are. That's the basic setup of this book, which is a semi-autobiographical account of a drug-fueled journey to the heart of American excess. The story is wild, filled with vivid descriptions of hallucinations and bizarre encounters, all while trying to make sense of the American dream. The way Thompson wrote was anything but conventional. His style was manic and surreal, blending reality with his drug-induced experiences. This wasn't about being an objective reporter, it was about diving into the madness and writing from within it. He described tripping on LSD or mescaline with such vivid detail that you could almost feel the room spinning around you. It was raw, unfiltered, and totally unique. Beyond the madness of his stories, there was always a deeper critique of society. In Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, for example, beneath the crazy road trip lies a sharp commentary on the failure of the 1960s counterculture and like the dark side of the American dream. Thompson wasn't just getting high for the sake of it, he was exploring the depths of human experience and society's contradictions. Now, Thompson's influence also goes beyond just his books. He became like a cultural icon, known for his wild lifestyle that included everything from heavy drug use to run-ins with the law. He lived in Woody Creek, Colorado, in a fortified compound where he continued his wild antics and writing until his death in 2005. His persona was just as legendary as his writing. He was a rebel, a provocateur, and a fierce critic of the establishment. Next up, we got ibogaine. Ibogaine is one of those substances that kind of stands out in the world of psychedelics because it's not just about the trip, it's also about healing. Derived from the root bark of the Tabernanthe iboga plant, which is native to West Africa, ibogaine has been used for centuries in traditional ceremonies. These ceremonies are deeply spiritual, involving rituals that aim to connect participants with their ancestors and to the spiritual world. But what makes ibogaine particularly fascinating today is its potential to treat addiction. Imagine struggling with addiction, trying countless times to break free, but finding yourself trapped in this relentless cycle. This is where ibogaine comes in, offering help where there often seems to be none. People who've taken ibogaine describe it as a life-changing experience. It's not just a high, it's an intense journey inward. Users report profound visions and a deep sense of introspection, often confronting painful memories and emotions. The experience can be physically taxing, think nausea, vomiting, and intense fatigue, but many believe these challenges are part of the healing process. During the trip, which can last anywhere from 12 to 24 hours, users often feel like they're being guided by some kind of internal wisdom, helping them understand the root causes of their addiction. What's truly remarkable about ibogaine is its potential to reset the brain's chemistry. People report that after one intense session, their cravings for drugs like heroin or alcohol diminish significantly, sometimes disappearing entirely. It's as if ibogaine hits the reset button on their addiction, giving them a clean slate. Of course, ibogaine isn't a magic bullet. It's not a cure, but rather a powerful tool that can aid in the recovery process. After the initial experience, ongoing therapy and support are crucial to maintain sobriety. But also, this stuff is still illegal in a lot of countries, including the US. However, there are places in Mexico and Canada and some European countries where you can legally undergo ibogaine treatment. But again, I'm not condoning anything in this video, okay? Next up, we're gonna talk about chakras. Chakras are a concept from ancient Indian traditions, specifically rooted in Hinduism and later adapted by various other spiritual practices, including Buddhism and New Age spirituality. The term chakra comes from the Sanskrit word for wheel or disc and refers to centers of energy within the human body. These energy centers are believed to be spinning wheels of light that correspond to different aspects of physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. There are 7 main chakras aligned with the spine, each associated with a specific physical and spiritual function or functions. So first, there's the root chakra. This is located at the base of the spine. The root chakra is associated with grounding, stability, and survival. Its color is red. When balanced, it provides a sense of security and connection to the physical world. An imbalance can lead to feelings of fear and insecurity. Next, we have the sacral chakra. Situated just below the navel, the sacral chakra is linked to creativity, sexuality, and emotions. Its color is orange. A balanced sacral chakra allows for healthy relationships, pleasure, and creativity. Imbalance might result in emotional instability or sexual dysfunction. And then thirdly, we have the solar plexus chakra. Located in the upper abdomen, the solar plexus chakra is the center of personal power, confidence, and self-esteem. Its color is yellow, and when in harmony, it fosters a sense of purpose and self-worth. Imbalance can cause issues with self-doubt and control. Fourth, we have the heart chakra. Found in the center of the chest, the heart chakra is associated with love, compassion, and forgiveness. Its color is green, and a balanced heart chakra promotes healthy relationships and emotional well-being. An imbalance can lead to feelings of loneliness and emotional pain. Fifth, we have the throat chakra, located at the throat. This chakra is linked to communication, truth, and self-expression. It's blue. Six, we have the third eye chakra. This one's positioned between the eyebrows and it's connected to intuition, insight, and spiritual awareness, and it's indigo. And then finally, the seventh one is called the crown chakra. It's located at the top of the head, and this chakra is the center of spiritual connection and enlightenment, and its color is either violet or white. But now, how are these chakras related to psychedelic drugs? Well, as we've talked about, many people report having profound spiritual awakenings while using psychedelics, which often include feelings of unity, interconnectedness, and enlightenment. These experiences align with the goals of balancing the crown chakra, which is associated with spiritual connection and enlightenment. Users may feel a direct connection to a higher power or a universal consciousness, similar to what's described in spiritual practices that involve chakras. Psychedelic experiences can also facilitate deep emotional release and healing by bringing repressed emotions and traumas to the surface. This process relates to the heart chakra, which governs love, compassion, and emotional well-being. Confronting these and releasing these emotions can lead to a more balanced heart chakra. So yeah, I could go through all these and explain how they might relate to psychedelics, but yeah, I mean, each chakra can just kind of, have its way of doing psychedelics can help balance it, at least in the right circumstance, because we've talked about, in the first video, set and setting, like your mindset and where you are, like it can be a good trip or a bad trip, but even a bad trip might imbalance a chakra, so chakras could be, in that school of thought, be pretty attributed to psychedelic drugs. Next up, let's talk about hyperspace surgery. Hyperspace surgery is a term that emerges from the experiences of users taking powerful psychedelics like DMT. When people refer to hyperspace surgery, they're talking about a vivid, surreal experience that feels like an encounter with advanced, otherworldly entities performing some form of metaphysical or psychic operation on their consciousness. Imagine you take a hit of DMT, and within seconds, you're propelled into a completely different realm, often described as hyperspace. This place is filled with intensely bright colors, intricate geometric patterns, and entities that seem both alien and familiar. These beings, sometimes referred to as machine elves or hyperdimensional doctors, appear to be waiting for you, as if they've been expecting your arrival. Once in this state, users often report a sensation that these entities are working on them in some way. It's not a physical surgery, but it feels incredibly real. The beings might be rearranging your thoughts, healing your psyche, or imparting profound knowledge. People describe this process with a mixture of awe and reverence, noting that it often feels beneficial even if it's not fully understood. The surgery might involve a deep, intuitive feeling of being examined or adjusted. Some users report a sense of having parts of their consciousness removed, cleaned, and replaced. Others describe it as a download of information or an upgrade to their mental and spiritual faculties. The experience is often accompanied by a feeling of being profoundly loved and cared for by these entities, as though they're benevolent doctors ensuring your well-being. I'm real or no one is real. Feeling that I'm not real or no one is real can be quite disorienting, and it's a notion that often surfaces during or after intense psychedelic experiences. These thoughts are linked to the concept of solipsism, which questions the reality of anything outside of one's own mind. Psychedelics can amplify this by breaking down the usual boundaries of perception and self, leading to profound feelings of detachment or oneness with everything. When under the influence of psychedelics, people often experience a dissolution of the ego, the part of the mind that maintains the boundary between the self and the external world. This ego dissolution can lead to a sense of unity with the universe, but it can also provoke existential questions. You might start wondering if your reality is just a construct of your mind, and if anything or anyone outside your own consciousness is real. This experience can be both liberating and frightening. So, on one hand, it can give you a deep sense of connection to the universe, a feeling that you're part of a greater whole. On the other hand, though, it can be unsettling, making you question the nature of existence and reality. These experiences can lead to profound insights, but they can also cause confusion and distress if not integrated properly. Now, this feeling especially comes out during drugs like ketamine and DXM. These are drugs known as dissociatives. So DXM, found in cough syrups, can create a sensation of floating outside one's body or existing in an entirely different realm. High doses can lead to profound detachment from reality, where the boundaries between self and the environment kind of blur, which lead to thoughts about the unreality of existence. Ketamine, often used as an anesthetic, is another powerful dissociative. It can produce what is known as a K-hole, a state where users feel completely separated from their physical bodies, and may experience intense hallucinations and altered perceptions of time and space. During a K-hole, users might feel like they're traveling through different dimensions or that their sense of self has dissolved entirely, leading to existential reflections on the nature of reality and existence. Hyperspace lexicon is a fascinating concept often discussed by those who have ventured into the realms of intense psychedelic experiences, particularly with substances like DMT. We already talked about hyperspace a little bit. It's just a realm that's characterized by vivid, hyperdimensional landscapes filled with intricate patterns, bright colors, and often inhabited by seemingly intelligent entities. The term hyperspace lexicon itself implies a kind of language or set of symbols unique to this dimension. Users often describe encountering complex geometric shapes and symbols that seem to carry deep meaning, although they are beyond the understanding of normal linguistic frameworks. These symbols might appear as part of the environment or be communicated by the entities inhabiting hyperspace. The entities encountered in hyperspace are frequently described as highly intelligent beings that communicate through telepathy or these visual symbols. They're often called machine elves or hyperdimensional beings and are said to possess a playful and profound demeanor. But we already kind of talked about hyperspace, so I'm going to move on. Betty Eisner. Betty Eisner was a pioneering psychologist who played a significant role in early psychedelic research. She worked closely with Dr. Sidney Cohen in the 1950s and 60s, exploring the therapeutic potentials of substances like LSD and psilocybin. Eisner believed that psychedelics could help patients achieve breakthroughs in therapy by breaking down barriers to their unconscious minds. Eisner's approach was holistic, incorporating not just the drug sessions, but also extensive preparatory and follow-up work. She emphasized the importance of set and setting, ensuring that the environment was conducive to therapeutic breakthroughs. Her patients often experienced profound insights and emotional releases, which she believed were crucial for healing. Despite the promising results, her work, like that of many psychedelic researchers at the time, faced significant pushback during the 60s as the political climate around these substances changed. But O.N. Ulrich, O.T. Oss. O.N. Ulrich and O.T. Oss are the pseudonyms of Terence McKenna and his brother Dennis McKenna, two influential figures in the field of psychedelic studies. They co-authored the book Psilocybin Magic Mushrooms Grower Guide in the late 70s, which became a seminal work in the DIY cultivation of psilocybin mushrooms. Terence McKenna, a philosopher and ethobotanist, and Dennis, a research pharmacologist, used these pseudonyms to protect their identities while promoting the therapeutic and consciousness-expanding potential of psychedelics, particularly psilocybin mushrooms. And their work did significantly influence the psychedelic movement and the study of entheogens. Next up, we have Kambo. Kambo is a traditional medicine used by various indigenous tribes in the Amazon rainforest. It involves applying the secretion of the giant monkey frog to small burns on the skin. This practice is believed to cleanse the body, mind, and spirit, and is used to treat various physical ailments, increase stamina, and improve mood. The secretion contains a complex mix of bioactive peptides that have powerful physiological effects, including purging toxins, boosting the immune system, and enhancing mental clarity. The process of a Kambo ceremony typically begins with a shaman or a practitioner making small burns on the participant's skin, usually on the arm or leg. The frog secretion is then applied to these burns, allowing it to enter the lymphatic system. Almost immediately, the participant experiences intense physical reactions such as vomiting, sweating, and rapid heartbeat, which are seen as part of the detoxification process. People who undergo Kambo treatments often report a range of benefits, including the heightened senses, increased energy, and emotional release. However, it's important to know that Kambo is a powerful substance and can be risky, especially for those with certain medical conditions. It's crucial to have the ceremony conducted by an experienced practitioner who can manage the intense effects and ensure the safety of the participant. Next up, we got holotropic breathwork. Holotropic breathwork is a powerful therapeutic technique developed by Stanislav Grof and his wife, Christina Grof, in the 1970s. It uses accelerated breathing patterns and evocative music to induce altered states of consciousness, similar to those experienced with psychedelics. The process aims to facilitate deep emotional and psychological healing. During a holotropic breathwork session, participants lie down and breathe rapidly and deeply while listening to music designed to evoke a range of emotions. This intensive breathing can lead to a non-ordinary state of consciousness where participants might experience vivid imagery, emotional breakthroughs, and profound insights. The session is usually followed by a period of integration where participants reflect on their experiences through art, journaling, or group discussions. Holotropic breathwork is based on the idea that these altered states can help access and process repressed emotions, memories, and traumas. It's often used as a tool for personal growth, spiritual exploration, and healing. It's pretty cool. Alright, next up we got the Marsh Chapel Experiment. The Marsh Chapel Experiment, also known as the Good Friday Experiment, was a groundbreaking study conducted in 1962 by Walter Pank, a Harvard Divinity School student, under the supervision of Timothy Leary, who we talked about him like a bunch in the first video. The experiment aimed to investigate the potential of psilocybin, a psychedelic compound in mushrooms. 20 theology students participated, half receiving psilocybin and the other half receiving a placebo. The setting was a Good Friday service at Marsh Chapel at Boston University, designed to provide a conducive environment for spiritual experiences. The results were striking. Those who took psilocybin reported profound, life-changing mystical experiences characterized by a sense of unity, transcendence, and deep spiritual insight. Many experienced feeling an overwhelming sense of connection to a higher power and a loss of ego. The placebo group, in contrast, did not report similar experiences, highlighting the powerful impact of psilocybin. Now, the Marsh Chapel experiment was special because it was one of the first scientific studies to investigate the potential of psychedelics to induce mystical experiences. And it was also like different because it was in like a religious context where they were all like religious people in a church. Now next we got the Dom/STP panic. This refers to a series of alarming incidents that took place in the late 1960s involving the psychedelic drug STP, also known as Dom. Developed by Alexander Shulgin, this powerful hallucinogenic was significantly more potent and longer lasting than LSD. In 1967, it was distributed at the Summer of Love in San Francisco without proper information about its potency or duration, leading to widespread panic and hospitalizations. People who took STP were unprepared for its intense and prolonged effects, which could last up to 24 hours or more. Many users experienced overwhelming hallucinations, severe anxiety, and a sense of losing control, prompting emergency medical interventions. The media dubbed it the STP panic. So yeah, that'd be kind of scary. I mean, imagine you just don't know what you're getting and you get a drug that's stronger than LSD and it can last up to 24 hours. That's crazy. All right, next up, we're going to talk about Ezekiel 1 and 10. So diving into the vivid and complex visions described in Ezekiel 1 and 10, it's fascinating to consider whether these accounts could be akin to experiences described by modern users of psychedelic drugs. Ezekiel's descriptions of seeing 4 living creatures with multiple faces and wings, surrounded by wheels within wheels full of eyes, strike a chord with the surreal and intricate hallucinations reported by users of substances like LSD, psilocybin, and especially DMT. The entities encountered during such psychedelic trips often appear as otherworldly and imbued with a sense of profound meaning or divinity, much like the biblically accurate angels Ezekiel describes, which are far more alien in appearance than the human-like angels commonly depicted in later Christian iconography. You know, like the babies with wings and stuff. This overlap leads to intriguing possibilities, like could the prophetic visions in religious texts such as the Book of Ezekiel have been influenced by naturally occurring or ingested substances that were capable of inducing altered states of consciousness. In many ancient cultures, substances that altered perception were not only known, but were also used ceremonially to gain insight or spiritual experiences that we've already talked about a lot. While there's no direct evidence to suggest that Ezekiel used such substances, the parallels between his visions and those experienced under the influence of psychedelic drugs, remember especially DMT, are pretty compelling. They both share a profound transformative visual and emotional impact, often coupled with a sense of encountering the divine or the utterly unfathomable. And with that, we're done with that layer. We have 4 layers left though, so don't get too bored, and the next one I'm actually gonna give over to my friend Clicks. This guy, I found him like a few months ago because he made a video basically disgracing my drugs Iceberg video, but it was a great video and I reached out to him and he's cool and he wanted to help out with this psychedelic drugs Iceberg. So yeah, thanks Clicks for coming out. Go sub to him, and yeah.
What's up guys? It's me, Clicks, and this is the 4th layer, so let's just get right into it. Starting off with machine elves. Now machine elves are entities that Terence McKenna first discovered when he did DMT. Now what these elves do is they transform themselves and the objects surrounding them in a fluorescent playpen of hills and flashing lights. Now upon hearing this, your first thought might be, okay, well this guy took way too much fucking fucking DMT and he's deluded. But according to him, he's not the only person to have seen these elves before. And strangely enough, between 1990 through 1955, the first ever US study into psychedelics was taken at the University of New Mexico by Dr. Rick Strassman. Now, Strassman administered DMT to 60 volunteers in a clinical setting and recorded these 60 people, and they all said that they could see these machine elves. Now, McKenna's description of these elves goes as follows.
And then, of course, the thing about DMT that I should have mentioned that is the most astonishing, appalling, and the definitive characteristic is that for a lot of people, myself included, you burst into a place that is absolutely swarming with some kind of intelligent life. I mean, I call them self-transforming elf machines. It's definitely an elf place. And, you know, you thought you were going to get the white light, or you thought you were going to get an Huxley-esque aphorism on form and void. And no, you got 16 elves trying to climb inside your clothes in this broom closet in hyperspace that you've broken into. Very odd. You, at that moment, when you encountered this tribe of elves, your choices are pretty stark. You have to either immediately jettison everything you've ever believed about reality, or you have to immediately embrace the idea that you are now absolutely crackers.
And so the question remains, do humans conjure up these images when administered DMT? Or were we actually visiting the place where they exist? However, another study was conducted in 2014 by the Journal of Psychopharmacology, and they surveyed 2,561 adults about their encounters with entities on DMT, and 81% of respondents described their encounters as being more real than reality. So who knows, maybe on your next DMT trip you'll be able to meet biblically accurate Will Ferrell. Next up, we've got Billy Graham. Now, Billy Graham was an American evangelist, and he didn't really have any profound views on drugs besides the basic, drugs are bad for you, and God wouldn't want you to do them.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
He was friends with President Eisenhower, President Johnson, and President Nixon. He was also pretty cool with Martin Luther King Jr., and he let him preach at a revival in New York City. Other than that, he didn't really like gay people or women, and he didn't really like his kids that much either. Although later on in 2011, he did admit that he kind of wished he didn't go out to get the milk for too long. So I think the main takeaway from this is that he definitely agrees with this message right here.
And if you do drugs, you go to hell before you die. Please.
The Archaic Revival. Now, The Archaic Revival is a book made by Terence McKenna, and it's actually a collection of articles, essays, and interviews that contain a web of understanding that he's gleaned from his psychedelic explorations. So it's basically just him talking about how he hit a fucking bong with the machine elves, but he describes it as my explorer's notepad, my journey of travel through time and ideological space. Now, the full name of this book is actually The Archaic Revival: Speculations on Psychedelic Mushrooms, the Amazon, Virtual Reality, UFOs, Evolution, Shamanism, the Rebirth of the Goddess, and the End of History, which sounds like some pretty freaky shit. And in this, he also argues for the return of the psychedelic experience into human society via shamanism and the incorporation of shamanic techniques within a scientific paradigm that aims to transform society, starting with the individual dissolution of ego. So if any of that wacky shit piques your interest, you can buy this book on Amazon for about $16, or you can just read it for free on the Open Library. And yeah, so let's just move on to Hendrix on LSD at Woodstock. Now, what this entry is referring to is Jimi Hendrix, one of the most influential electric guitarists in the history of music. I'm sure you know the rest, he's a pretty popular guy. Now, Hendrix was a pretty avid user of drugs, and he'd pretty frequently drink in excess or mix drugs, and he actually got arrested for it on 1969 in Toronto when authorities found a small amount of heroin and weed in his luggage. But moving back to the actual entry itself, Hendrix would also use these drugs on sets, of course, and I think this entry confuses Woodstock with Monterey Pop, because on that show he actually was on LSD. And during this set, he set his guitar on fire. And funnily enough, there is a carving of exactly where that happened on stage. I mean, dude was a fucking mad lad. Just look at this shit. Obviously, the guitar didn't survive this, and he smashed it into pieces and threw it at the crowd. But one of the pieces survived and is now on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. Now, this wasn't actually uncommon for him, as he'd do this without being on LSD, but I think it's just pretty funny that he did do this on LSD specifically. Next up, we have extended state DMT. Now, what this is referring to is a modification of DMT known as DMT-X. Sounds pretty fucking rad, I know. But this theoretical version of DMT has been known to last for hours and even days. It's extremely unstable and hasn't really been tested. Now, given what we already know on DMT, this DLC version of DMT would have you talking to wizard dinosaurs for days. One of the study subjects for this new version of DMT says NASA might be spending billions sending rockets to space, but what we're doing in this little experiment is probably far greater in terms of understanding the nature of our existence. But the purpose of this new variant of DMT is so that you can actually try and understand what the trip actually meant, as opposed to the quickie where it's just like, what the fuck did I just see? And so this new version of DMT might be able to let us talk to these beings that we see in the visions, such as the machine elves, for a much longer period of time and actually help us understand our existence as we know it. However, this is a fairly new concept of DMT, so don't expect anything else from it for another 5 years. But hopefully soon we'll be able to fully understand these beings through this new version of DMT. Next up, we have Time Weave, which is the description of the feeling that time has slowed down, sped up, or that someone has gone backward or forward in time while on LSD. Now, as of now, this is mainly a placebo effect. There's nothing really confirming the existence of time weaving when on psychedelics, and I couldn't find any studies that confirmed this or proved it, so honestly, I think we can just say this is theoretical for now. However, if we can see literal fucking elves, I'm pretty sure that experiencing this isn't too far out of the question. What I think this effect can be chalked down to is the loss of time or not being able to tell what time it is. Because if you take any psychedelic, it's probably going to feel like literal years if you have a bad trip, but on the outside it'll probably feel like about an hour for anyone who isn't experiencing it. I remember seeing a story about a guy who said he became a chair for 1,000 years while having a bad trip on acid. So taking that into account, I don't think there's any actual evidence to support that we can go into the future or the past by going on LSD. Endogenous DMT. Now, endogenous DMT is actually DMT within your body. Now, this is actually a naturally occurring molecule currently running in you right now, but it's not actually that well understood yet. This is a pretty new founding, but apparently you actually need this molecule within you to actually experience DMT. But this endogenous version of DMT actually acts against systemic hypoxia within the body, which basically means it makes sure that you have oxygen in your body at all times. So this actually means you have an internalized version of DMT within your body, and every single mammalian being for that matter, protecting you from hypoxia. DMT is also being studied as a potential cure to Parkinson's disease, and clinical depression for that matter. Next up, we have,
peruvianus, Bridges D.
Yeah, so Triceratops pussy Peruvian bridges is actually a native cacti to Peru. So this specific cactus has been used in South American medicine for almost 2,000 years at this point. It's also known as the San Pedro cactus or the St. Peter cactus, in reference to the cactus allowing users to reach heaven while still on Earth, which is basically code for getting you really fucking high. This specific cactus contains mescaline, which is a psychedelic, and is pretty similar to LSD and psilocybin, but it's very, very unique. And according to a research project in the Netherlands, ceremonial San Pedro use seems to be characterized by relatively strong spiritual experiences and low incidence of challenging experiences. So in layman's terms, it's essentially LSD but without the risk of a bad trip. Now, surprisingly enough, it's actually legal to cultivate this cactus in most countries, but not consume. Which is kind of stupid because, I mean, like, if you can cultivate it, you're just gonna eat it anyway. I mean, who's gonna stop you? Next up, we have LSD no-hitter. Now, this is actually in reference to a baseball game on June 12th of 1970, where the Pittsburgh Pirates beat the San Diego Padres by 2-0. And what makes this game so special is that Doc Ellis, a Pirates pitcher, went and threw a no-hitter despite being high as a kite on LSD, which, by all accounts, should be completely impossible. Like, seriously, you have to understand Throwing consistent no-hitters while you're talking to machine elves is a pretty insane feat, and the story behind this is honestly pretty funny. So according to Ellis, he went to go stay with a friend in LA a day before his start, took acid, stayed up really late drinking and doing drugs and losing track of which day it was. The day of his start, he woke up thinking he was supposed to pitch the next day, took another hit of acid at noon, only to learn that 2 hours later from his friend that he was supposed to pitch today. He got on a plane an hour later and made it to the park 90 minutes before the first pitch. When he got up to the plate, he was also seeing some pretty crazy shit, stating that he thought Richard Nixon was the home plate umpire and that he thought he was pitching a baseball to Jimi Hendrix, who was holding a guitar and swinging it over the plate. Now, it's impossible to tell whether or not this is actually true, given that all of these accounts are from Ellis himself and not the aforementioned friend. But if true, it's pretty funny to say the least. Next up, we've got Richard Schlutz. Now, contrary to the way this genius typed this up, his name is actually Richard Evans Schultz, and he's considered to be the father of modern ethnobotany, which is essentially the study of religious plants for rituals and cultures and whatnot. Now, his work primarily consisted of studying hallucinogenic plants, particularly in Mexico and the Amazon. He also wrote a book, The Plants of the Gods, Their Sacred, Healing, and Hallucinogenic Powers, published in 1979, which was co-authored by the chemist Albert Hofmann, who actually discovered LSD, and it's considered his best work. He was a very heavy contributor to the psychedelic era with his discoveries and personally disdained its proponents. He was led to study psychoactive drugs by Heinrich Kluver, a leading scholar of this subject. This led him to make field observations on the Native American peyote cult among the Plains Indians in his travels with Weston LaBarre in the early 1930s. He's actually in a movie too called El Abrazo de la Serpiente, or Embrace of the Serpent, and it's pretty good. Next up, we've got Steve Jobs did acid. Now, this is actually based off of multiple experience that Daniel Kotke had with Steve Jobs when they were both in college. This was obviously before Apple was a thing. Now, Kotke describes themselves during this time as being monk wannabes, and they were apparently on a quest to better understand consciousness using an LSD varietal known as Orange Sunshine, which Poi talked about earlier. They studied books on chakras, psychic energy, the chi, and quote-unquote, the Kundalini serpent that was going to rise up our spine. Jobs and Kotke would read, go on hikes, and wander the rose gardens at Reed College. Jobs has actually been quoted saying that LSD was one of the most profound experiences of his life, and surprisingly enough, the name for Apple came from his experience working on an apple farm of another fellow tripper from the same college. He was never actually an engineer major, nor did he study it, but through LSD he'd actually developed a curiosity about how chips worked and spent his free time reading Byte magazines and the manual for the 6502 processor. And from the very beginning, Jobs was absolutely obsessed with making every single aspect of the product as aesthetically pleasing as possible. However, sometime after January 1977, Jobs had stopped taking LSD as frequently. His attention was now more focused on Apple itself, being that it was becoming a very successful brand. HPPD, or Hallucinogen Persisting Perception Disorder. Now, HPPD is a non-psychotic disorder which a person experiences apparent, lasting, or persistent visual hallucinations or perceptual distortions after using drugs, specifically in this case psychedelics. It's a hallucinogen-specific disorder, but the specific contributory role of psychedelics are unknown. These visual hallucinations are described to be visual snow, trails and afterimages, light fractals on flat surfaces, intensified colors, altered motion perception, pareidolia, micropsia, and macropsia. And you don't even have to be on drugs to experience this either. People who've never taken drugs before have said to have experienced this at least once. Right now, I'll put up on screen what the visual snow looks like. Now, there's actually two versions of HPPD. There's HPPD-1 and HPPD-2, which is the sequel, I guess, because the first one was too boring. Now, HPPD-2 is actually more affected by psychedelics as well as comorbid mental disorders. Some people with HPPD say that they developed these symptoms after their first use of LSD or psychedelics. There's not really a ton of research on HPPD at the moment, so there's not a lot of effective treatments, etiology, or relationships to other disorders. So basically, to put it into perspective what HPPD actually looks like, if you stare at the sun, you'll obviously see like a dot in your eye for like a few minutes, right? But imagine if it was like an hour, with the addition of Zack Snyder's slow-mo and blur effects. Now, HPPD can be caused by a numerous amount of things, not just psychedelics, but It's a pretty common side effect after use. There's honestly so much speculation around this topic, it's honestly not worth going over all of it, so let's just move on to soul surgeries. Also characterized as surgery beyond bodies. Soul surgery is defined as surgery of the body to obtain primarily mental outcomes. This is different than a brain surgery or a lobotomy, which is very ineffective when actually trying to treat mental illness. But basically, soul surgery involves delving into one's innermost being, confronting past experiences or beliefs that may be holding them back, and working through them to achieve greater emotional, psychological, and spiritual growth. It may involve various therapeutic modalities such as psychotherapy, meditation, mindful practices, journaling, and self-reflection. So it's not literally a surgery on your soul, and it's actually attributed to a journey of self-discovery and healing, where individuals seek to reconnect with their true essence, release emotional burdens, and cultivate a greater sense of inner peace and authenticity, often aided by the use of psychedelics. Obviously, you don't need psychedelics to do soul surgery, but it's a pretty easy method of doing it. So essentially what soul surgery is self-healing, but epic. Next up, 5-MAPB. Now, 5-MAPB is basically just a legal version of Molly, and from what I've looked at, it seems to me like it's actually not illegal anywhere. So yes, it is quite literally just the legal version of Molly. There really isn't that much of a difference in either of them, so honestly, you could just cite what Poi said for Molly, and that would basically be it. Next up, we have Locked Out, which could honestly mean anything, but the entry is linked to an IMDb page of a movie called Locked Out. Now, this is actually a French movie, the story of a glue-sniffing homeless person who stumbles upon a policeman committing suicide and decides to put his abandoned uniform to good use. Initially, this means using it to steal food from the police canteen, but soon, Roland discovers that wearing the uniform gives him certain powers and responsibilities, particularly tracking down the kidnapped child of a former porn star whose picture he had fallen in love with. Now, this is actually a French movie, and I have no idea where you can watch this because I would love to see this shit. If anybody knows how to watch this shit, please leave it in the comments. I really want to see what the fuck this is. Stoned ape theory. Now, the stoned ape theory is a theory proposed by Terence McKenna in his book Food of the Gods. This theory claims that the transition from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens and the cognitive revolution was caused by psilocybin mushrooms. This theory uses evidence largely based on studies from Roland L. Fisher from the 1960s and 70s. However, McKenna's argument has been largely rejected by the scientific community that cite numerous alleged discrepancies with his theory, so take this with a grain of salt. Now, basically what this theory consists of is that due to desertification in Africa, humans retreated to the shrinking tropical forests following cattle herds whose dung attracted the insects that he states were certainly a part of the human diet at the time. According to his hypothesis, humans would have detected psilocybe cubensis from this due to it often growing in cow pats, which is literally just cow shit. According to him, access to and ingestion of mushrooms was an evolutionary advantage to humans' omnivorous hunter-gatherer ancestors, which also provided humans with the first religious impulse. He believed that psilocybin mushrooms were the evolutionary catalyst from which language, projective imagination, the arts, religion, philosophy, science, and all of human culture sprang. So basically what this means is that humans took shrooms and then we instantly gained all of our cultural beliefs as of today. He heavily referenced studies from the aforementioned Roland L. Fisher, claiming that minor doses of psilocybin improve visual acuity, which bettered the hunting skills of early primates. At higher doses, he contended that mushrooms would increase libido, attention, and energy, resulting in greater reproductive success. And at even higher doses, the psilocybin would promote greater social bonding within early human communities, as well as make group sex activities, which I guess just means that they would have giant monkey orgies. He also theorized that at this level of psilocybin intake, it would trigger activity in the language-forming region of the brain, resulting in the mental development of visions and music, and kickstarting the development of language by enriching their troop signals. Like I said earlier, this theory has been widely criticized by the scientific community, and it was also labeled overly speculative, with them also claiming it misrepresented the studies of Roland L. Fisher. So yeah, just take this with a grain of salt. This theory does sound fairly interesting, but McKenna is also dead at this point in time, so don't really think that theory is ever going to be fully realized, but if it ever is, and we find out that we actually used to all have giant ape orgies, then, you know, that'd be cool. The next one we have is LSD made me gay. Now this entry is actually linked to a Reddit post called Psychedelic Trip and Transgender or Gay Thoughts. And in order to fully understand this post, I think I'm just gonna have to read this out loud, so here it is. So, I thought this might be a place I could get some more information. About 3 months ago, I had a very disorienting LSD trip at a concert that made me feel either gay or transgender. It basically felt my masculinity was taken away. Some background info. I did not consider myself transgender or gay before this trip, and I have taken psychedelics many times. While I'm open-minded and have had a couple of homosexual experiences in my life, I've had many more heterosexual ones and always considered myself straight, or at most bisexual with a 90% preference for women. I just love women and have always been attracted to them. Masturbated, okay, come on, dude. Well, I had this awful LSD trip at a concert. I've taken acid at plenty of concerts before, but this time was different. I went out there with a girl I'm just friends with, but who I've had something of a crush on for the past year. Never worked out, though. And I wasn't planning on trying to hook up with her or anything, though. I may have just been subconsciously wanting that to happen. So I take acid before the show. Things are okay the first half of the show, but I felt kind of weird. Whatever, not worried. I was also out there with a male friend of mine who, to be honest, I had kind of resented for a while. Even though he's a good guy, he's kind of annoying. But he was going by himself, so I figured we should all ride together. Ended up fighting with my dad about taking my mom's car, blah blah blah, I don't give a fuck. Anyway, at one point during the show, I went to smoke a joint and asked this one girl in my group of friends for a lighter, and she said to ask one of the boys. I internalized this to mean she thought I wasn't a man or something. It made me very uncomfortable. I think if I was sober, I would have been able to just shrug it off, but in my state, it really affected me. I ran off, got a beer, didn't go back to my friends because anxiety, and spent the rest of the night trying to dance and or smoke a joint with random women in the audience, all of whom were very friendly. Of course, this strategy did not work. I was very out of it. At one point, I was dancing up on the concourse, just trying to walk around and dance, and I felt like I was really strutting my stuff and showing off, so to speak. Then at one point, I took a break and stopped dancing. Instantly, I felt an awful feeling in the pit of my stomach. I don't know if anyone here is into Eastern mysticism, but it basically felt like my third or second chakra, or both, completely switched off or reversed. All of a sudden, I didn't feel like a normal man. I can't explain it, but I felt like I knew what it meant to be gay, or even transgender. My mojo, in quotes, was gone, and I felt like I would be unable to do anything other than get fucked in the ass. Me, considering myself a straight male, found this very uncomfortable. I truly have no desire for that at all. Thinking about that did not arouse me, and it didn't feel like I discovered something about myself. I just felt sad and dirty and perverted. It basically felt like I failed at being a man, and so I was condemned, either by myself, or God, or the universe, or what have you, to now live life as a gay man or a transgender male-to-female person. So I actually looked around to see if there were actually, like, common experiences of this to actually make you gay, like this guy puts it. And honestly, all I can really chalk it up to is either this guy is actually gay, or there are intrusive thoughts creeping in while he's under the influence. In fact, a lot of the opinions I saw were that of LSD helped me realize I was gay, so dude, I might have news for you.
You're gay! He's gay!
The Hat Man. Now, the Hat Man is a reportedly common entity that people see when they're under the influence of psychedelics. However, it's more common to see him on Benadryl. Similar to the Machine Elves, you could probably meet this guy and talk to him as well. But apparently you don't have to be under the influence of anything to see the Hat Man either. And at first glance, it's easy to dismiss this Hat Man as a psychedelic delusion, but the eyewitness accounts of this being are so many that it's just impossible to say this is just one junkie's delusional vision. And judging by most of these eyewitness accounts, he's not a very benevolent being. People describe him as more akin to that of a shadow being. And strangely enough, most of these eyewitness accounts don't even admit to being under the influence or having any psychiatric issues beforehand either. And the main consensus around the Hat Man is that he's actually a very real being. But going back into his general description, he is widely known as a shadow person, which is basically exactly what it sounds like. According to Wikipedia, a shadow person Discretion is the perception of a patch of shadow as a living species, humanoid figure, or sometimes interpreted as the presence of another spirit or other entity by believers in the paranormal or supernatural. There aren't really any discernible features on him other than his, well, hat. But a lot of people describe this hat man as staring at them frequently, or getting really close to their face and just looking at them. And the most common way to actually meet this hat man is being under the influence of Benadryl. So if you want to meet the hat man, here's what you gotta do. Take some Benadryl, mix it in with some weed, roll it in a joint, smoke it, take some alcohol, and then lay down and strap yourself to a bed. I'm just kidding. Please don't actually do that. Hey guys, so this is June Clicks here. That last part you heard was recorded in May. I moved into my basement and now I am recording there. Originally this section was an hour and 8 minutes long, but for some reason I made the mistake of using DaVinci Resolve, so only about 30 minutes of it exported properly. With DaVinci being the toxic X that it is, it had to ruin this entire fucking project before I got rid of it for good. But anyways, I've made some lifestyle changes. I am actually now transpender, so please only refer to me by the pronouns guap fiend. And all pointless whiny expository dialogue aside, let's move right back into the iceberg, starting with Dark Night of the Soul. The Dark Night of the Soul is a phase of passive purification of the spirit in the mystical development as described by the 16th century Spanish mystic and poet Saint John of the Cross. And this phase of purification was described in a poem written by St. John of the Cross between the years of 1577 and 1579. And here is the actual poem itself. On a dark night, kindled in love with yearnings, oh happy chance, I went forth without being observed, my house being now at rest. In darkness and secure, by the secret ladder disguised, oh happy chance, in darkness and in concealment, my house being now at rest. In the happy night, and secret when none saw me, nor I beheld aught, without light or guide, save that which burned in my heart. This light guided me, more surely than the light of noonday, to the place where he, well I knew who, was awaiting me, a place where none appeared. O night that guided me, O night more lovely than the dawn, O night that joined beloved with lover, lover transformed in the beloved. Upon my flowery breast, kept holy for himself alone, there he stayed sleeping, and I caressed him, and the fanning of the cedars made a breeze. The breeze blew from the turret as I parted his locks. With his gentle hand, he wounded my neck, and caused all my senses to be suspended. I remained, lost in oblivion, my face I reclined on the beloved. All ceased, and I abandoned myself, leaving my cares forgotten among the lilies. Now, this poem can be used as a synonym for a crisis of faith. More generally, it is used informally to describe an extremely difficult and painful period in one's life. This crisis can be endured for a long time. For example, the Dark Night of St. Paul of the Cross in the 18th century endured for 45 years, from which he ultimately recovered from. The Dark Night of Mother Teresa, whose own name and religion she selected in honor of Teresa Lisieux, may be the most extensive such case on record, having endured from 1948 almost until her death in 1997, with only brief interludes of relief, according to her letters. Inayat Khan states there can be no rebirth without a dark night of the soul, a total annihilation of all that you believed in and thought that you were. This is more generalized to be like a path that somebody has to go through. Like, you have to be really deep in the shit before you can truly be reborn and be like cool, I guess. I don't fucking know. Of course, I'm trying to put this in more general terms outside of religion. What this has to do with LSD or psychedelics, I have no fucking clue, but here it is. Aztec mushroom sacrifices. Now, if you know anything about the Aztec people, you know they were all gung-ho about sacrificing for the sun god, the water god, the snake god, whoever the hell, just so they could sacrifice somebody. It was pretty boring back then. They didn't have any poi videos or clicks videos to watch. They used to refer to mushrooms back then as teonanacatal, which in Nahuatl means the flesh of the gods. Psilocybin has a very long history of use within Mesoamerica. The members of the Aztec upper class would often take teonanacatal at festivals and large gatherings. According to Fernando Alvarado Tezozomoc, it was often a difficult task to procure mushrooms. They were quite costly as well as very difficult to locate, requiring all-night searches. The Aztecs would drink chocolate and eat the mushrooms with honey. Those partaking in the mushroom ceremonies would fast before ingesting the sacrament. The act of taking mushrooms is known as monona kahuia, meaning to mushroom oneself. In observations under the influence of the doctrine of Catholicism recount the use of the mushroom along the Montezumanic people. Allegedly, during the emperor's coronation ceremony, many prisoners were sacrificed, had their flesh eaten, and their hearts removed. Those who were invited to the guests to the feast ate mushrooms, which Diego Duran describes as causing those who ate them to go insane. After the defeat of the Aztecs, the Spanish forbade traditional religious practices and rituals that they considered pagan idolatry, including ceremonial mushroom use. So yes, way back when, they did used to sacrifice people under the influence of mushrooms. Very devout Tenochtitlan stands. Next up, Leonard Pickard. Now, Pickard is one of two people convicted in the largest LSD manufacturing case in history. Now, who the hell is William Leonard Pickard? Now, I want you to think of this guy as the Walter White of LSD. Seriously, they have so many similarities, it is like uncannily weird. Okay, so in high school, he was an honor student. He played basketball and was named the most intellectual. He earned a scholarship to Princeton University, but he dropped out after one term, preferring to hang out at Greenwich Village jazz clubs instead. After 1974, his academic resume begins a 20-year gap. Pickard then began to work with a group of LSD traffickers known as the Clear Light System in the 60s. Pickard is said to have contributed to LSD chemist Nicholas Sands' legal fund following Sands' arrest in 1972. Pickard then partnered up with Clyde Apperson. Is this not, like, literally just Breaking Bad? He had laboratories in a number of different locations. He never liked to stay at one location for more than 2 years so as not to draw attention to himself. He had labs all across the West Coast, and one of his main customers was Petaluma Al. The Grateful Dead played a huge part in the distribution of this LSD, giving away most of it at their concerts. One night in 1999, when Apperson and Pickard were moving their facility to a different location, they were pulled over by a Kansas Highway Patrol car under the guise of the DEA. Obviously, Pickard noticed something was wrong, so he took off being a marathon runner into the woods and didn't get caught until the next day. Essentially, though, when he did get caught, he got sentenced to... Actually, you know what? I want you to take a good 10 seconds to figure out how much that an LSD distributor's sentence is worth in prison, okay? Just take a little bit of time to really understand, okay? Think about what you would think would be a fair, just time in prison for selling LSD, okay? Alright, you got it? Alright. It was 2 fucking life sentences. So, essentially, he served Jeffrey Dahmer times 2. This guy was serving Albert Fish sentences for LSD. Thankfully, though, they realized how stupid as fuck that shit was in 20 years, and they let him off the hook. Still way too long, in my opinion, but... you know. Still alive to this day, but back in his heyday when he was distributing and making LSD, he totaled for about 80% of the entire world's LSD manufacturing. So, there you go. MHRB, ACRB, or Mimosa teniflora. Mimosa teniflora is a perennial tree or shrub native to the northeastern region of Brazil and is found as far north as southern Mexico. Fern-like branches have leaves that are mimosa-like, finely pinnate, growing to 5 centimeters long. Each compound leaf contains 15 to 33 pairs of bright green leaflets that range to 5 to 6 millimeters in length. The tree itself grows up to 8 meters or 26 feet tall and can reach 4 to 5 meters or 13 to 16 feet tall in less than 5 years. It's also an entheogen or psychedelic used by the Harema cult in northeastern Brazil. Dried Mexican teniflora root bark has been shown to have a DMT content of about 1 to 1.7%. The stem bark has about 0.03% DMT. Tenoflora is also used in the clandestine manufacture of crystalline DMT. In this form, it is psychoactive by itself when vaporized and inhaled. So basically, tenoflora is just a vapable DMT when crystallized. And while normal DMT is actually illegal to buy, if you brew it through tenoflora, it's actually lawful. Okay, that does not mean make it, okay? I'm not a genius on the law. Do not take that to heart, okay? Do not try and make vapable DMT. Next up, the entourage effect. The entourage effect is a concept primarily related to the use of cannabis and the interaction of its various compounds to produce a synergistic effect. This idea suggests that the therapeutic effects of cannabis are not solely due to the individual cannabinoids like THC or CBD, but rather the combined action of these oh my fucking god! Cannabinoids, along with other compounds such as terpenes and flavonoids. Key components of the entourage effect are cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids. Now, cannabinoids are the active chemical compounds in cannabis. The most well-known cannabinoids are THC, which is psychoactive, and CBD, which is non-psychoactive. There are many other cannabinoids, each contributing different effects. Terpenes are aromatic compounds found in many plants, including cannabis. They give cannabis its distinct smell and may also have a therapeutic effect. Examples include myrcene, limonene, and pinene. Flavonoids are found in a variety of plants and contribute to the color, flavor, and aroma of cannabis. They are believed to have various health benefits. So, for example, an apple has flavonoids that make it taste like a fucking apple. How the entourage effect works is that it posits the combined action of cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids that enhance the overall therapeutic effects of cannabis. This synergy might lead to better outcomes for various conditions compared to using isolated compounds. For instance, pain relief. A combination of THC, CBD, and certain terpenes may be more effective in managing pain than THC or CBD alone. Anxiety and mood disorders. The presence of specific terpenes may enhance the anxiolytic effects of CBD. Anti-inflammatory effects. Different cannabinoids and terpenes might work together to provide stronger anti-inflammatory effects. You're probably thinking to yourself, none of that has to do with psychedelics at all. And to that I would answer, you're absolutely fucking right. So let's move on to something else. STB, ATB extraction. These are extraction methods used in organic chemistry to isolate specific compounds from plant material or other sources. These methods are most commonly used for extracting alkaloids, cannabinoids, and other organic compounds. I'm not going to get into the specifics of how exactly the cultivation of this works because I don't want to commit suicide via 20 sniper shots to the back of my head, but the extraction methods are used in various fields, including pharmaceuticals, the cannabis industry, and the natural products chemistry. So this not only aids in the cultivation of pharmaceuticals and the like, it also helps cultivate psychedelics, which most of them are made with the intent of being pharmaceuticals. I don't exactly know why this is here, but it is related. So I'll give it that. Next up, we have Maria Sabina. Maria Sabina Magdalena Garcia was a Mazatec Sabia shaman and poet who lived in Huautla de Jimenez, a town in the Sierra Mazateca area of the Mexican state of Oaxaca in southern Mexico. He conducted sacred healing mushroom ceremonies called veladas that were based on the use of psilocybin mushrooms, particularly Psilocybe caerulescens, a sacred mushroom important to the Mazatecs. These veladas contributed to the popularization of indigenous Mexican ritual use of entheogenic mushrooms among Westerners, although she didn't intend for them to become popularized in the West. Maria Sabina's interactions with the Western world, starting with R. Gordon Wasson, have been described from an indigenous perspective as a story of extraction, cultural appropriation, bioprospecting, and colonization. Maria Sabina was named by foreigners the first contemporary Mexican curandera to allow Westerners to participate in the healing ritual known as the velada. Maria Sabina herself stated that she was not a curandera, that she was in fact a sabia, and that a sabia and a curandera are not the same practice. Before becoming a sabia, Maria Sabina tried curanderismo, but felt it to be very wrong for her. I'm sorry, there's so many ias in those sentences. It's just so funny to me. Now, if you're paying attention, you'll notice that the two terms sabia and curandera have come up multiple times. So let's not get things confused, okay? So a sabia literally just means like a wise person in Spanish. They're generally considered wise people who possess deep knowledge about the various aspects of life, like healing practices, herbal medicine, community wisdom, and curanderos are more like focusing. They just focus on healing for the most part. So basically, while both sabias and curanderas are respected for their knowledge and healing abilities, a sabia is more recognized for her overall wisdom and wide-ranging knowledge, whereas a curandera is known specifically for their healing practices. A lot of young people like hippies, celebrities, scientists, and a bunch of others visited her village in the 60s, including Bob Dylan, John Lennon, and Keith Richards, but those are just rumors because there's no photographic evidence or written reports. They didn't really respect the sacred and traditional purposes of the rituals, which caused her to remark, "Before Wasson, nobody took the children simply to find God. They were always taken to cure the sick," which is basically old Mexican lady for, "You stupid fucks are only taking this to get high." It got so bad that the Mexican army had to block American, European, and Mexican hippies or other unwanted visitors from entering on the only roads into the town. So yeah, really disrespectful shit. But more on the rituals themselves. They were sung in a shamanic trance, which she recounted as the saint children speaking through her. Works were translated from Spanish to English, and Henry Munn wrote about the significance of her language. Munn wrote that Maria Sabina brilliantly used themes common to Mazatec and Mesoamerican spiritual traditions, but at the same time was a unique talent, a masterful oral poet and craftsperson with a profound literary and personal charisma. He's been described as the greatest visionary poet in 20th century Latin America. Here is one of her poems. "Because I can swim in the immense, because I can swim in all forms, because I am the launch woman, because I am the sacred opossum, because I am the Lord opossum. I am the woman book that is beneath the water, says. I am the woman of the populous town, says. I am the shepherdess who is beneath the water, says. I am the woman who shepherds the immense, says. I am a shepherdess, and I come with my shepherd, says. Because everything has its origin, and I come going from place to place from the origin." Unfortunately, Sabina died in poverty on the 22nd of November in 1985. However, she is regarded as a sacred figure in Mexico. At the same time, her image is used to market various local commercial ventures, from restaurants to taxi companies. So rest in peace, Grandma. You will be remembered. Next up, we have Daryl Lemaire. Pretty insignificant guy, to say the least. He was born on August 28th, 1926, and was an American mining engineer and psychedelic drug researcher. Spent 2 years in the United States Navy from 1944 to 1946. He earned a BS in chemistry from the University of Nevada in 1950, followed by his master's in metallurgical engineering from Mackey School of Mines. While working at a uranium processing plant in Arizona, working closely with Navajo natives, Lemaire discovered peyote and became immensely interested in manufacturing and testing a variety of psychoactive substances. Lemaire used pseudonyms Hostine Nez and Lazar in order to publish a pamphlet on some of his findings regarding 2CD, which is also another psychedelic. He also did work involving the use of gum weed as a potential biofuel in conjunction with the individuals at the University of Nevada. That is basically it. Pretty underwhelming. But the next topic we're going to talk about is one of the worst things to happen in human history, right next to the Holocaust. Some of you may know what I'm talking about. Some of you may not know what I'm talking about. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, and we're going to be talking about MK Ultra. Project MK Ultra was an illegal human experiment program designed and undertaken by the US CIA to develop procedures and identify drugs that could be used during interrogations to weaken people and force confessions through brainwashing and psychological torture. MKUltra used numerous methods to manipulate its subjects' mental states and brain functions, such as the covert administration of high doses of psychoactive drugs, especially LSD, and other chemicals without the subject's consent, electroshocks, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse, and other forms of torture. The scope of MKUltra included over 150 sub-projects conducted in universities, hospitals, prisons, and other institutions across the United States and Canada. Most of these subjects were unwilling participants, and the experiments often caused insanely harmful psychological and physical damage. The origin of the project stems from the 1940s, when Nazi scientists working in the concentration camps of Auschwitz and Dachau conducted interrogation experiments on human subjects. Substances such as barbiturates, morphine derivatives, and hallucinogens such as mescaline were employed in experiments conducted on Polish, Czech, Jewish, Soviet, and other nationalities' prisoners of war, which aimed to develop a truth serum, which would, in the words of one laboratory assistant to Dachau scientist Kurt Plotner, eliminate the will of the person examined. MKUltra was a continuation of these projects, and these numerous Nazi scientists were hired to work for the US as part of Operation Paperclip. MKUltra officially began on April 13th of 1953 by Alan Dulles, the CIA director at the time. Its aim was to develop mind-controlling drugs for use against the Soviet bloc in response to alleged Soviet, Chinese, and North Korean use of mind control techniques on US prisoners of war during the Korean War. They wanted to use similar methods on their own captives and were interested in manipulating foreign leaders with such techniques, devising several schemes to drug Fidel Castro. I'm gonna interrupt this segment to tell you to go play The Outlast Trials. I'm not sponsored, but the game's really fun. I've been playing it for a while, and it is based on MKUltra, so yeah, that's it. Don't really know why I felt like I had to put that in here, but go do it anyway. Eventually, they suggested that the experiments begin on American citizens, which is where it gets really fucked. This is where LSD comes into the picture. They started to spread LSD to prisons, hospitals, institutions, clinics, and foundations in order to see how citizens would react to the drug without knowing exactly what is happening. They made a new kind of LSD, LSD-25, which came to dominate most of their programs. They wanted to know if they could make Soviet spies defect against their will, and whether the Soviets could do the same to the CIA's own operatives. Experiments included administering LSD to mental patients, prisoners, drug addicts, and prostitutes, or people who could not fight back, as one agency officer put it. In one case, they administered LSD to a mental patient in Kentucky for 174 days straight. They also administered LSD to CIA employees, military personnel, doctors, other government agents, and members of the general public to study their reactions. The aim was to find drugs that would bring out deep confessions or wipe a subject's mind clean and program them as a robot agent or a sleeper agent, essentially. Military personnel who received LSD were threatened with court-martials if they told anybody about the experiments. In the appropriately named Operation Midnight Climax, the CIA set up several brothels within agency safe houses in San Francisco to obtain a selection of men who would be too embarrassed to talk about the events. The men were dosed with LSD, the brothels were equipped with one-way mirrors, and the sessions were filmed for later viewing and study. In other experiments, people were given LSD without their knowledge. They were interrogated under bright lights with doctors in the background taking notes. They told subjects they would extend their trips if they refused to reveal the secrets. The people under this interrogation were CIA employees, US military personnel, and agents suspected of working for the other side in the Cold War. Long-term debilitation and several deaths resulted from this. Heroin addicts were also bribed into taking LSD with offers of more heroin. So honestly, nobody was safe. It didn't matter if you were in the CIA, it didn't matter if you were the fucking president, they would just give you LSD no matter what. At one point, there were even detention centers. However, in 1973 during Watergate, CIA Director Richard Helms, the stupid cunt, ordered all MKUltra files to be destroyed. Pursuant to this order, most CIA documents regarding this project were destroyed, making a full investigation of MKUltra impossible. And given this purposeful destruction of most records, its failure to follow informed consent protocols with thousands of participants, the uncontrolled nature of the experiments, and the lack of follow-up data, the full impact of MKUltra experiments, including deaths, may never truly be known. However, one of the most notable ones were that of Frank Olson, a United States Army biochemist and biological weapons researcher. He was given LSD without his knowledge or consent in November of 1953 as part of a CIA experiment and died after falling from a 13-story window a week later. This death was quickly assumed a suicide. However, his family disputed that. See, coincidentally enough, Olson had become considered a security risk who might divulge state secrets associated with highly classified CIA programs, about many of which he had direct personal knowledge of. A few days before his death, he quit his position as acting chief of Special Operations Division at Detrick, Maryland, because of a severe moral crisis concerning the nature of his biological weapons research. Later, forensic evidence conflicted with the official version of events. When Olson's body was exhumed in 1994, cranial injuries indicated that Olson had been knocked unconscious before he exited the window. His death was then termed a homicide. So yeah, I don't understand what CIA agents think when people become security risk. They just think, oh yeah, you know, suddenly Olson was just so embarrassed that he just decided to kill himself. That's a believable story. Thankfully though, a cache of 20,000 documents survived Helms's purge, as they had been incorrectly stored in a financial records building and were discovered following a FOIA request in 1977. These documents were fully investigated during the Senate hearings of 1977. And after all this, after nearly 20 years of pain, suffering, brainwashing, death, cover-ups, Gottlieb, the main scientist behind MKUltra, dismissed his entire effort as useless. So yes, dear viewer, this entire project was completely fucking pointless. And that, kids, is why you never trust the government. The more you know. Now let's move on to something less depressing, like Changa. Changa is a blend of DMT mixed with a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, or a MAOI. But you know what, for the fuck of it, I'm just gonna call them Mauis. The addition of Mauis extends the DMT experience in duration and intensity when compared with smoking DMT freebase alone. Typically, extracts from DMT-containing plants are combined with a blend of different Maui-containing herbs, such as the ayahuasca vine and/or leaf or harmala alkaloids from Peganum harmala to create a mix that is 25 to 50% DMT. It was created by Julian Palmer in 2003 and named when he asked for a moniker for the drug during an ayahuasca session. Palmer actively seeded Changa throughout the world, introducing it to the UK, Russia, India, Morocco, West Africa, Chile, Montenegro, and China. It got really popular in the mid-2000s, and its international introduction dates to the Boom Festival in Portugal in 2008. And it's still really popular now because it's super easy to smoke, it has real powerful effects, and a much longer duration than normal DMT, like, say, 10 to 20 minutes. That's all cool and dandy, but let's move on to something more interesting, like LSD dolphin research. Now, this entry links to an article that I have to make an account to this website to read, so fuck that, I already know this story by heart. So, this essentially goes all the way back to the 50s, during a secretive NASA project to get dolphins to learn how to speak English. This project was headed by a Dr. John Lilly, who hoped to commune with the creatures, nurturing their ability to make human-like sounds through their blowholes. This really niche kind of experiment was funded heavily and was spent a lot of time researching. And in 1964, Margaret Howe Lovat arrived to help with the project. She embraced Lily's vision to connect with the dolphins and threw herself into the work, spending as much time possible with the dolphins and carrying out a program of daily lessons to encourage them to make human-like sounds. Lovat began to live in the lab with the dolphins and flooded the lab with a few feet of water. She began to develop a close relationship with the male dolphin, Peter. And somehow, this ended up with her fucking the dolphin. So, that's a great story to tell your husband. Eventually after that, LSD came into the picture and didn't work very well. Eventually, NASA realized that the entire thing was retarded because dolphins don't have vocal cords. Peter then decided, without pussy, life wasn't worth living. So he dove all the way to the bottom of the pool and drowned himself. So yeah, what's the lesson we take from this? I think we just need to stick to chimps. 1P LSD. 1P LSD is a psychedelic drug of the lysergamide class that is a derivative and functional analog of LSD and a homologue of ALD52. It originated in 2015 when it appeared a designer drug sold online. It modifies the LSD molecule by adding a propionyl group to the nitrogen molecule of LSD's indole group. This is basically just a version of LSD used in experiments, and the subjective effects of 1P LSD are not really well defined in scientific literature, but they are generally thought to be comparable to that of LSD. And as of 2015, 1P LSD is unscheduled in the United States and Canada. So basically, it's legal LSD. Except once again, don't take my word for that. Next up, we have Moxie. Its technical name is 5-MeO-MIPT, and it's a psychedelic, obviously, and it's the analog of a more popular drug known as 5-MeO-DIPT, or Foxy. Some users report the tactile effects of Foxy-methoxy without some of the unwanted side effects. At higher doses, it becomes much more psychedelic, sometimes being compared to DMT. But at doses of 4 to 10 milligrams, users find Moxie to be a very euphoric and tactile chemical. Sounds can be amplified in perception to a point where synesthetic effects occur, which basically means you can fucking touch and taste sound. The toxicity of Moxie is not known. There's no documentation of death attributed to the use of Moxie alone. And this is also an unscheduled drug, which means it's legal, kinda. Like I said, don't take my word for it! But speaking of DMT derivatives, we're gonna move back onto the shit that you can see while on DMT, which includes jesters. Now, in the wonderful realm of DMT, there are beings adjacent to the machine elves known as jesters. And the way you can tell if you're encountering a jester is to look at the gestures of these jesters. Now try saying that 3 times fast. Gestures of jesters. It actually wasn't that hard. We refer to these distinctive behavior patterns as gestures with the J, or gesticulations. These gestures can include grinning, laughing, cavorting, and displaying and splaying limbs and hands in a silly, cheeky, humorous, odd, and entertaining way. These movements are often reminiscent of dancing, acrobatics, or magic tricks. The DMT jesters can adopt mudra-like hand poses, those symbolic gestures of the hands and fingers found in yoga. They're also used in rituals and religious iconography. These DMT entities also gesture theatrically, as if they are welcoming you to and guiding you through the unfolding show. They are classified as the presenters on duty. We can also find these jesters in various paintings, such as The Laughing Fool, The Jester, and Jesters at the Court of Empress Anna. These entities, whether they wear jester garb or not, can manifest gestures like presenting and manipulating objects in a jolly way, performing tricks, twirling, whispering secrets and sweet nothings, shushing, sticking their tongues out, etc. They're very cheeky and fun individuals. These entities can act so stereotypically like jesters. However, this is not to say that these entities appear and act solely like jesters. They can express a wide range of appearances and moods. They can be joyful and loving at times, and hostile and threatening on other occasions. Sometimes their trickster nature, although entertaining or jokey, may have an undercurrent. a hint or felt possibility of nastiness. There is a sense that their teasing can easily turn into bullying. One's mindset going into the experience can influence how the gestures appear, but it's also important how you respond to them in the moment. These entities can alter their mood and interactions with you in synchrony with the attitude you take towards them. If you heed the call of the gestures, try to learn from them, and respond with curiosity instead of fear. They then can be extremely friendly and welcoming. They may even appear like old companions who have awaited your return, eager to show you around and entertain you before you have to leave again. Yeah, I bet you weren't expecting a sequel to biblically accurate Will Ferrell. Next up, we have 4-ACO-DMT, or O-acetylpsilocin. Now, O-acetylpsilocin is a semi-synthetic psychoactive drug that has been suggested by David Nichols to be a potentially useful alternative to psilocybin for pharmacological studies, as they are both believed to be prodrugs of psilocin. However, some users report that O-acetylpsilocin's subjective effects differ from those of psilocybin and psilocin. Some users even prefer O-acetylpsilocin over natural psilocybin mushrooms. This is due to them feeling fewer adverse side effects such as nausea and heavy body load, which are more frequently reported in experiences involving natural mushrooms. O-acetylpsilocin was patented on January 16, 1963 by the aforementioned Albert Hofmann. Despite this, psilocybin remains a psychedelic compound with a limited history of use. It's theorized to be a prodrug of psilocin, as is psilocybin, which naturally occurs in many species of psychedelic mushrooms. So, essentially, think of this as a healthier version of shrooms. I don't really recommend taking it over shrooms, but there's less adverse side effects to doing so. It's kinda legal for lab research. So, once again, not sure if it's safe to buy, but it is kinda legal. Next we have the Shulgin Rating Scale. Now, basically this is just a simple scale for reporting the subjective effect of psychoactive substances at any given dosage and any given time. The system was developed for research purposes by the American biochemist Alexander Shulgin. Now, how do you use the Shulgin scale? Well, it includes 3 components: an identification of the chemical being ingested, a dosage, and a descriptive narrative including the ratings themselves used to describe various moments in time. The chemical itself must be clearly identified, preferably using chemical nomenclature as opposed to popular or street names, so you would say LSD instead of acid. The dosage must be known and communicated, as substances may result in wildly different ratings at different doses. The rating itself gives a comparable value relating to the subjective intensity of the experience, including auditory, visual, emotional, mental, physical, and other sensory effects. The narrative may include various Shulgin ratings, noting the time to achieve various levels, and for instance, this is how you would describe it. In parentheses, with 22 milligrams, that's the dosage, a slow onset. It took an hour for a +1 and almost another 2 hours to get a triple plus. Very vivid fantasy images. Eyes closed, but no blurring of lines between reality and fantasy. Some yellow-gray patterns a la psilocybin. Acute diarrhea at about the 4th hour, but no other obvious physical problems. Erotic lovely. Good material for unknown number of possible uses. Can explore for a long time. Better try 20 milligrams next time. Now, what do those pluses mean that I was just talking about? Well, let's get into that right now. There are 6 levels on the quantitative potency scale, such as minus, plus minus, +1, +2, +3, and finally +4. Now, let's go over the entire scale. Minus N. On the quantitative potency scale, there were no effects observed. Next one, plus minus, the level of effectiveness of a drug that indicates a threshold action. If a higher dosage produces a greater response, then the plus minus was valid. If a higher dosage produces nothing, then this was a false positive. +1, the drug is quite certainly active. The chronology can be determined with some accuracy, but the nature of the drug's effects are not yet apparent. +2, both the chronology and the nature of the action of a drug are unmistakably apparent, but you still have some choice as to whether you will accept the adventure or rather just continue with your ordinary day's plans, if you are an experienced researcher, that is. The effects can be allowed a predominant role, or they may be repressible and made secondary to other chosen activities. So, basically, if you're a lightweight, you basically are fucked, and if you're not a lightweight, you can just be like, okay, yep, I can take this, I can go to my 9 to 5 right now with while tripping. Upgrading from that, we have a +3. Not only are the chronology and the nature of a drug's action quite clear, but ignoring its action is no longer an option. The subject is totally engaged in the experience, for better or worse. So, you are fully fucking geeking right now. And next, the highest and the most rare state, +4, which has been called the peak experience, a religious experience, divine transformation, a state of samadhi, and many other names in other cultures. It is not connected to the +1, +2, and +3 of the measuring of a drug's intensity. It is a state of bliss, our participation mystique, a connectedness with both the interior and exterior universes, which has come about after the ingestion of a psychedelic drug, but which is not necessarily repeatable with a subsequent ingestion of that same drug. If a drug, or technique or process, were ever to be discovered which would consistently produce a +4 experience in all human beings, it is conceivable that it would signal the ultimate evolution, and perhaps the end of the human experiment. So yeah, you're completely fucking astronomically geeking, dude. Shulgin's book, PIH Cal, A Chemical Love Story, goes deeper into this, so if you want more information on the Shulgin scale, go read that. Next we've got mushroom caves. And the article that this entry is linked to is in French. So let's just pretend I speak French and get right into it. The Cave of Roaches. So yeah, the Cave of Roaches, also known as the Mushroom Caves, are a part of a vast network of tunnels and caves in France's Loire Valley. They're the result of hundreds of years of mining the Boer region's prized white limestone. In addition to their function as limestone mines, these caves were once used as dwellings, storefronts, restaurants, and wine cellars. Today, the quarrying has ceased and the dwellings and storefronts are largely gone, but one industry continues to make use of these caves' dark, dank environments. Mushroom farms have been a very long troglodytic tradition. Though their numbers have declined in recent years, the region remains a major exporter of specialty mushrooms, particularly the native peed blue, or Bluefoot variety. The cave's humid air and constant temperature of 53 degrees Fahrenheit provide ideal conditions for fungi to thrive. Different cultivation methods are employed depending on the species. Native oyster mushrooms are grown on blocks composed of soil and horse manure, while shiitakes make their home on blocks of sawdust. Visitors to the caves are invited to sample fresh plucked mushrooms and purchase larger quantities from the on-site shop. The Cave of Roaches makes up roughly 75 miles of the valley's 1,200-mile cave network. Public tours of the Cave of Roaches have helped make them among the best known of the region's mushroom caves. The nearby Museum of Mushrooms outside Saint-Hilaire, Saint Florent offers visitors another opportunity to tour a working mushroom cave and learn about the region's rich history of mushroom cultivation. So yeah, while that sounds really cool and shit, none of these are psychedelic mushrooms. So this is kind of irrelevant, but yeah, now you know about the French Cave of Mushrooms. In fact, shrooms are illegal in France completely. So yeah, no, this isn't like an underground black market ring of psilocybin mushrooms. So yeah, way to go, guys. That's great research. Next we have Huxley died on LSD. Now, who is Aldous Huxley? Well, Huxley was a British author that specialized in writing books on the effects of psychedelics. He was actually born on the same year as Maria Sabina, which is kind of funny. But anyways, yeah, he had a really big bibliography of stuff about psychedelics, and that's really all I care about. So eventually, Huxley began to suffer from advanced laryngeal cancer, which caused significant pain and discomfort for him in his final days. And on his deathbed, on his final days, his final request to his wife, Laura, was to administer LSD to him. He believed that it would help him face death with greater serenity and insight. Laura injected him with 2 doses of LSD, which is 100 micrograms each, as per his request to aid in his transition from life. He died at age 69 at 5:20 p.m. after his wife administered both doses of LSD to him, which means that we were literally 1 hour away from being able to say that he died at 69/4/20. He also died in Compton. Not the Compton that you're thinking of. He died at the same time as John F. Kennedy and C.S. Lewis, which is pretty interesting. That's like 3 famous people just die on the same day. Reports suggest that the LSD helped Huxley experience a more peaceful and introspective death, aligning with his philosophical beliefs about consciousness and spirituality. Huxley's death, coinciding with his use of LSD, has been interpreted as a final exploration of the psychedelic experience, consistent with his life's work and interests. This act has become a poignant example of the use of psychedelics in end-of-life care, sparking discussions about their potential benefits in alleviating the psychological distress associated with terminal illnesses. So basically, his use of LSD at the time of his death was a deliberate choice reflecting his deep-seated beliefs in the power of psychedelics to enhance human consciousness and provide comfort in facing the unknown. The main takeaway from this is that if you're gonna die, you're gonna die hanging out with the fucking machine elves. Next up, we have LSD killed an elephant. The name of this elephant in question was Tusco. On August 3rd, 1962, researchers from the University of Oklahoma injected Tusco with 297 milligrams of LSD, which is nearly 3,000 times the human recreational dose. Within 5 minutes, he collapsed to the ground, and 1 hour and 40 minutes later, he died. It is believed that the LSD was the cause of his death. No shit, Sherlock. Although, some speculate that the drugs the researchers used in an attempt to revive him may have contributed to his death. So, rest in peace, Tusco. You died for absolutely nothing. Next we have Spiritual Crisis, not to be confused with the Dark Night of the Soul we talked about earlier. Spiritual crisis, also called a spiritual emergency, is a form of identity crisis where an individual experiences drastic changes to their meaning system, typically because of a spontaneous spiritual experience. So basically, think that one guy's basically coming out as gay on LSD. Okay, I don't care how much coping he does in that Reddit story, he's fucking gay. Now, spiritual crises have multiple triggers, not just psychedelic experiences, like near-death experiences, intense meditation or spiritual practices, and traumatic life events. Now, there are some specific characteristics to these crises, such as existential questions like questioning the meaning of life, their purpose, their relationship with the universe, so on and so forth. Intense emotions like extreme heightening of confusion, anxiety, depression, and even euphoria. Altered states of consciousness. Experiences of altered perception, mystical experiences, or a sense of bliss and connection to the universe. Disconnection from reality. Difficulty in distinguishing between spiritual experiences and everyday reality, which can lead to a sense of isolation or alienation. I'm sure at some point most of you have come into contact with one of these crises. I surely have. It's just one of those things where you decide you want to go baptize yourself at 3 in the morning, which I may or may not have done. But most of the time, these crises have a positive outcome to it, like it can lead to a more profound and enriched spiritual life, increased self-awareness, and a deeper sense of peace. Or for others, it can remain a challenging experience requiring ongoing support and coping strategies. which thankfully I don't deal with that one, but if you do, sorry, that kind of sucks for you. Coming up next, we have Alcoholics Anonymous almost included LSD as a step. Now, if you somehow don't know what Alcoholics Anonymous is, it's basically a support group or rehab for alcoholics. Essentially, how Alcoholics Anonymous works is that you go to the rehab and you have to go through these 12 steps to becoming closer to, being healthier and not being an alcoholic anymore. The first step is to admit that you are powerless over alcohol, that your life had become unmanageable. The second step is to come to believe that a power greater than yourself can restore you to sanity. The third step, making a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand Him. Number 4, making a search and fearless moral inventory of yourself. Step 5, admitting to God, yourself, and to another human being the exact nature of your wrongs. 6, you are entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects from your character. Number 7, humbly ask Him to remove your shortcomings. Number 8, made a list of all persons you harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Number 9, made direct amends to those people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Number 10, continue to take personal inventory and when you were wrong, promptly admitted it. Number 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve your conscious contact with God as you understand Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Number 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, you try to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. So those are the 12 normal steps for Alcoholics Anonymous, but what if there was a 13th step that actually involved the use of LSD? The logic behind this was that LSD, by mimicking insanity, could help alcoholics achieve a central tenet of the 12-step program proposed by AA, he believed. It was a matter of finding a power greater than ourselves that could restore us to sanity. Bill Wilson, the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, warned that I don't believe LSD has any miraculous property of transforming spiritually and emotionally sick people into healthy ones overnight. It can set up a shining goal on the positive side. After all, it is only a temporary ego reducer. He then added the vision and insights given by LSD could create a large incentive, at least in a considerable number of people. But Wilson was far from pleased with the idea of alcoholics being assailed by some strange chemical, as he puts it. But despite that, Wilson still continued to experiment with LSD, and he actually thought it helped him eliminate many barriers erected by the self or ego that stand in the way of one's direct experiences of the cosmos and of God. He thought he might have found something that could make a big difference to the lives of many who still suffered. But the actual organization itself was totally against the suggestion. As word of Bill's activities reached the fellowship, there were inevitable repercussions. Most Alcoholics Anonymous were violently opposed to his experimenting with a mind-altering substance. Back then, LSD was completely unfamiliar, poorly researched, and entirely experimental, and Bill was taking it. So, in summary, they viewed it as hypocritical because, if you're an alcoholic, you're trying to get off of one drug, you're not trying to go directly to another one. And while LSD itself is not really addictive, at the time, it wasn't researched at all, so there wasn't any way to prove that it wasn't addictive. So, yeah. Maybe someday we can get that step added, but I think people just need to not do substances while they're already addicted to another one. So, probably made the right call there. And the last, most certainly least entry of this layer is The Machine. It's basically just a really underwhelming psychedelic rock band. The music's okay, I guess. It's just kind of like a bad Pink Floyd. But what do I know, though? I listen to Drain Gang and Osama-san. And that's gonna be all from me for this layer. I hope you guys have enjoyed it so far, and I hope you to continue the rest of this while my compadre Poi continues the iceberg. Just one more disclaimer before I go. Please, 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 pretty please with a cherry on top, do not take anything I say as fact. I am a YouTube retard. I am by no means a professional in pharmacology, okay? Do your own research. A lot of the shit on some of these icebergs can be fake, so just keep that in mind and do your own research. And lastly, again, I want to thank Poi. I can't wait to do more collaborations with him in the future, and I'd like to ask you humbly, the viewer, to please check out my channel if you like some of the shit he does. I make the same kind of stuff he does, if not better. Sorry. Not sorry. So yeah, go check out some of my stuff down below. It'll be linked in the description. And enjoy the rest of the video. See ya.
Alright, now it's back to me, and let's get into this next layer. We have 3 left now. Okay, so we're going to talk about how MDMA was called Adam. So MDMA was first synthesized in 1912, but it didn't make much of a splash until the 1970s, when a few forward-thinking psychotherapists started experimenting with it in their sessions. They found that it had a remarkable ability to help patients lower their emotional defenses and communicate more openly. It was like it helped them cut through their own inner noise and really connect with their feelings and the person sitting across from them. This was a game changer in therapy, where getting to the emotional truth quickly can sometimes take months or even years. The therapists who use MDMA believe that it was not just another drug, it was a tool for deep, meaningful healing. So because of this, they called it Adam, referencing the biblical figure who represents humanity in its most natural and uncorrupted state. The idea was that MDMA could help bring people back to their emotional baseline, free from the social masks and walls we build up over time. This therapeutic use of MDMA was quite groundbreaking, and there was a strong belief among these early users that it could revolutionize psychotherapy. They documented cases where MDMA sessions led to breakthroughs for patients who had been stuck for a long time, particularly those dealing with PTSD, anxiety, and interpersonal issues. However, by the mid-1980s, MDMA began to escape the clinic and seep into the broader culture. It started showing up in bars, nightclubs, and at raves. The setting and intentions behind its use shifted dramatically, from a controlled, therapeutic environment aimed at emotional exploration to festive, recreational settings where the goal was more about euphoria and social connection. As this shift occurred, the name ecstasy emerged and stuck. This name captured the joyful, euphoric highs people felt dancing and mingling under its influence, which was a stark contrast to the introspective, therapeutic sessions facilitated by Adam. So yeah, that's pretty cool, man. That's pretty cool. Alright, now we're going to talk about Santo Daime. Santo Daime is a spiritual movement that began in the 1930s Amazon rainforest. It was founded by Raimundo Eniro Serra, who was influenced by indigenous Amazonian beliefs, African animism, and Christian mysticism. And this rich blend makes Santo Daime truly unique. The core of Santo Daime's practice involves the ceremonial use of ayahuasca, a psychoactive brew. Ayahuasca is made from a special kind of vine and the leaves of a special kind of shrub. This combination makes a pretty powerful psychedelic experience, which members of Santo Daime use as a sacrament, believing that it connects them with the divine. What's particularly interesting about Santo Daime is how they integrate these intense spiritual experiences with a structured set of rituals and hymns, which are said to guide the psychedelic journey, ensuring that it remains spiritual and healing and not just, a psychedelic trip. These ceremonies can last for several hours, and they're filled with music, dancing, and prayer. Now, in Santo Daime ceremonies, participants often share stories of meeting the Queen of the Forest, a spiritual entity considered to be a guardian of the Amazon and a central figure in many of their visions. This being is described as a motherly figure who imparts wisdom and offers protection. The encounter can feel incredibly real and profoundly moving, with the queen sometimes giving specific advice on personal or community issues. Another eerie element reported by participants is the phenomenon of physically experiencing the sensations of other life forms, like plants or animals, during a ceremony. Some describe feeling as though they are undergoing transformations, gaining insight into the non-human perspectives of the natural world around them. This deep, empathetic connection can be both enlightening and unsettling, though, because it can kind of do the same thing like dissociatives do, where it dissolves the usual boundaries between yourself and the other. And in these experiences, combined with the setting, which is usually a dimly lit room or a secluded spot in the forest, and the collective energy of a group intensely focused on spiritual exploration, create a palpable atmosphere. But it seems kind of scary, bro. I'm not gonna lie. It seems kind of scary. Phalaris grasses. Phalaris grasses, also known as canary grasses, are a group of grass species within the genus Phalaris. These grasses are known for their hardiness and adaptability, making them prevalent in various environments from wetlands to gardens, and even as invasive species in some regions. Among the different types, Phalaris arundinacea and Phalaris aquatica are the most recognized. These are reed canary grass and aquatic canary grass. These species are often used in agriculture as fodder because they grow quickly and are resilient to many conditions. One of the intriguing aspects of Phalaris grasses is their biochemical makeup, particularly their role in entheogenic practices due to their presence of DMT. This has garnered a lot of interest from those exploring natural sources of DMT for use in preparations or for other psychonautic explorations. However, extracting DMT from these grasses is very complex and can be very illegal. And it also depends on the species, growth conditions, and time of harvest. And despite their potential in psychedelic research, Phalaris grasses also pose challenges. Like, for instance, Phalaris arundinacea has become an ecological concern in some regions as it can dominate wetlands and displace native species. Managing these grasses in wild and agricultural settings requires a lot of careful consideration of both their utility and their invasive potential, so, gotta be careful with those. Alright, next up we have the story that Nixon was almost dosed. There's an intriguing anecdote from the counterculture era involving President Richard Nixon and the infamous Merry Pranksters, a group known for their widespread promotion of psychedelic drugs, most notably LSD, under the leadership of figures like Ken Casey. According to Tom Wolfe in his book, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, which chronicles the adventures of the Merry Pranksters, there was a plan to dose Richard Nixon with LSD. The story goes that Ken Casey and the Merry Pranksters considered slipping LSD into Nixon's drink during a party that was both attended by Nixon and where Casey was present. The pranksters were known for their acid tests, events where LSD-laced drinks were distributed freely, and they saw it as a form of social experimentation and a way to expand consciousness. However, Nixon was notoriously cautious and known for his controlled public appearances, making it extremely unlikely that he would consume anything that could have been tampered with. The plan, whether seriously intended or just a part of the pranksters' lore, never came to fruition. Nixon, for his part, went on to become one of the most ardent opponents of the drug culture, spearheading initiatives that led to the war on drugs and stuff. But I don't know, it could have happened. Who knows, right? Next up, we have Quanah Parker. Quanah Parker is a fascinating figure in American history. So, born around 1845 or 1852, we don't really know, Quanah was the son of Cynthia Ann Parker, a white settler who was captured by the Comanche and integrated into their tribe. His heritage made him a living symbol of the cultural fusion and tensions of his time. Quanah's early life was marked by the harsh realities of frontier conflicts. After the Texas Rangers attacked his tribe's camp in the Battle of Peace River in 1860, his mother was recaptured and returned to her white family, but she never truly readjusted to life outside the Comanche community and died in deep sadness, longing for her life with the Comanche. Quanah rose to prominence during a period of significant resistance by the Plains tribes against the encroachment of settlers and the military. He became a formidable war leader, particularly noted for his participation in the fierce resistance during the Red River War. This series of battles in 1874 was crucial in the history of the Plains War, representing the desperate, yet ultimately doomed, effort by the Comanche and other tribes to preserve their lands and way of life. So after the tumultuous Red River War and his subsequent transition to reservation life, Quanah Parker became a pivotal role in the adoption and spread of the Native American church movement among the Plains tribes, including the Comanche. This religious movement integrated the use of peyote in its ceremonies, which was, and still is, considered a sacrament capable of healing the body and the soul, providing visions and spiritual insight. Peyote ceremonies typically involve an all-night session of prayer, singing, and the ingestion of peyote, leading to introspective and often visionary experiences. These experiences are viewed as a way of communicating with the spirit world, seeking guidance and fostering community and understanding among participants. Quanah's embrace of peyote ritual was not only a spiritual choice, but also a strategic one, as it offered a means of cultural preservation and resilience in the face of an overwhelming cultural and physical displacement. Now, Quanah advocated for peyote because he believed in its therapeutic benefits, both spiritual and physical. He argued that it was a way to combat the despair and dislocation felt by his people under the pressure of reservation life. His leadership helped to formalize the use of peyote into a structured religious framework, which was crucial in its legal defense. The Native American Church, with peyote at its sacramental core, eventually gained legal protections in the United States, despite the broader American legal system's harsh stance against other psychedelic substances. Alright, now we're gonna talk about how Joseph Smith might have done psychedelics. So there's a fascinating theory out there that Joseph Smith, the founder of the Latter-day Saint movement, might have used psychedelics. It sounds pretty wild, but let's dive into it a bit. Some researchers suggest that Smith's visionary experiences, like the ones that led to the creation of the Book of Mormon, could have been influenced by entheogens, substances that induce spiritual or mystical experiences. So the speculation is based on a few key points. First, the 19th century America that Joseph Smith lived in was a place where folk medicine and natural remedies were widely used. People often turn... Fuck. If you can hear my phone, like my phone falling in the recording, you can just like bleep that and leave it in, and like... That's kind of goofy, right, guys? That's kind of goofy. I'm talking to my editor now. Anyways, first, the 19th century America that Joseph Smith lived in was a place where folk medicines and natural remedies were widely used. People often turned to plants and fungi with psychoactive properties for various purposes, including spiritual insight. There's some evidence suggesting that Smith and those close to him might have had access to these substances. For instance, certain types of mushrooms, cacti, and even toads contained powerful psychoactive compounds. These natural psychedelics were known to indigenous people and were sometimes used in rituals. So the theory goes that Smith could have incorporated these into his own spiritual practices, intentionally or otherwise, which might explain the vivid and detailed nature of his visions. One of the most compelling arguments comes from comparing Smith's experiences to known effects of psychedelics. His visions often included profound encounters with otherworldly beings and divine revelation, similar to the kind of experiences that people report after using substances like psilocybin mushrooms. The sense of awe, the vivid imagery, and the profound insights are all a hallmark of a psychedelic experience. Of course, this idea is still pretty controversial and isn't widely universally accepted by scholars. There's no direct historical evidence that Smith used psychedelics, no journal entries or letters explicitly stating it. Most of the evidence is circumstantial, but you know. It's an intriguing point though. If Joseph Smith did use entheogenics, it would place him in a long tradition of religious figures who would have used natural substances to experience this, like, spiritual enlightenment. Alright, now we're gonna talk about DMT at birth and death. The idea that DMT might play a role in the experiences surrounding birth and death is a topic that straddles the line between fascinating science and speculative theory. DMT is a powerful psychedelic compound, we've already talked about it a bunch. But here's the thing, it's also produced in small amounts in the human body naturally, particularly in the pineal gland, though this is still a topic of ongoing research. Some researchers and theorists propose that DMT could be released in significant amounts during critical moments of human life, such as birth and death. This idea stems partly from the nature of DMT experiences, which often include intense, vivid visions, feelings of transcending time and space, and encounters with otherworldly entities or realms. These experiences can feel profoundly significant and often carry themes of rebirth, death, and the journey of the soul. At birth, the theory suggests that the release of DMT could help infants transition into consciousness, aiding the brain in adapting to the overwhelming influx of sensory information outside the womb. This might explain why newborns appear to be in kind of like a dreamlike state, gradually acclimating to their environment. As for death, the idea is that a surge of DMT might occur as the brain experiences the stress and transition of dying. This could potentially account for the common elements of near-death experiences reported by many people, which is like seeing bright lights, experiencing a life review, encountering deceased loved ones, and a feeling of peace or even euphoria. These experiences are similar to those induced by DMT, leading some to hypothesize that the body's natural production of the compound might provide a sort of biochemical passageway, easing the transition from life to whatever lies beyond. However, I know I don't want to be a loser, but it is important to know that this theory, while captivating, is still speculative. The scientific community has not conclusively proven that DMT is released in large quantities at birth or death. The logistics of measuring such a release in real time are incredibly challenging, and ethical considerations further complicate research in this area, so maybe one day we'll know. Alright, next we're going to talk about alien information theory. Alien information theory is a fascinating concept introduced by Dr. Andrew Gallimore, a computational neurobiologist and pharmacologist, in his book, Alien Information Theory, Psychedelic Drug Technologies in the Cosmic Game. This theory delves into the nature of reality, consciousness, and the profound experiences induced by powerful psychedelics such as DMT. So, Gallimor's central thesis is that reality as we perceive it is a form of information processing. Our brain acts as biological computers, decoding a complex stream of data into the rich sensory experience that we call life. According to Gallimore, psychedelics like DMT can temporarily disrupt this process, allowing us to perceive different layers of reality or alternate modes of information processing that are usually hidden from our everyday consciousness. One of the most intriguing aspects of alien information theory is the idea that the intense, often otherworldly experiences induced by DMT might actually be glimpses into these alternative realities. Users of DMT frequently report encountering highly intelligent autonomous entities in these altered states, beings that seem to exist in a realm fundamentally different from our own. Gallimore suggests that these entities could be real, existing in a parallel layer of information space, and that DMT acts as kind of a reality switch, tuning our perception to this other layer. This theory challenges our traditional understanding of consciousness and reality. It implies that our everyday reality is just one of many possible realities, each structured by different rules of information processing. DMT, by altering the brain's decoding mechanisms, allows us to experience these alternative realities, which might explain why the experiences are so vivid, consistent, and shared among users despite cultural or personal differences. Gallimore's theory also touches on the notion of the cosmic game, where reality is seen as a vast, complex game of information exchange. In this game, consciousness plays a central role, acting as both the player and the processor of information. Psychedelics then are tools that can help us understand and navigate this game, providing insights into the deeper structures and rules that govern our existence. Alright, next we're going to talk about the League of Spiritual Discovery. The League for Spiritual Discovery, or LSD, was a spiritual organization founded by Timothy Leary in the 1960s, who we already talked about a lot, but in case you forgot, he's a former Harvard psychologist turned counterculture icon, and he became one of the most prominent advocates for the use of psychedelics, particularly LSD, as a means to expand consciousness and achieve spiritual enlightenment. Leary's journey into the world of psychedelics began with his work at Harvard University, where he and a fellow psychologist, Richard Alpert, later known as Ram Dass, conducted experiments with psilocybin mushrooms. These experiments, though controversial, convinced Leary of the profound potential of psychedelics to transform human consciousness. When the LSD became more widely available, Leary saw it as the next step in this transformative process. The League for Spiritual Discovery was essentially a way to provide a religious and legal framework for the use of LSD, aligning it with the First Amendment's protection of religious freedom. Leary envisioned the League as a new kind of religion, one that used psychedelics as sacraments to explore and expand the human mind. The League's motto, turn on, tune in, drop out, encapsulated Leary's vision for a society where individuals could transcend their ordinary states of consciousness and connect with deeper spiritual truths. Members of the League for Spiritual Discovery would gather for communal experiences, often involving the use of LSD in a guided, intentional manner. These sessions were designed to be more than just recreational. They were seen as spiritual journeys aimed at achieving personal growth, insight, and a greater connection to the universe. Leary's efforts with the League were part of a broader movement during the 1960s that saw psychedelics as tools for societal change. This movement believed that by altering individual consciousness, it was possible to change societal structures and promote peace, love, and understanding. However, the widespread and unregulated use of psychedelics also led to a backlash, resulting in the criminalization of LSD and other similar substances by the end of the decade. Despite its relatively short lifespan, the League for Spiritual Discovery left a pretty lasting impact on the culture of the 60s and the ongoing conversation about the role of psychedelics today, so it was pretty important. Alright, this one stuck out to me whenever I was looking at this iceberg. This one is Psychedelics Lab in Volcano. So the idea of a psychedelics lab in a volcano sounds like something straight out of a science fiction novel or a either really bad or really old video game. But it's based on a real and intriguing story. So in the early 1960s, a group of dedicated scientists, including renowned chemist Albert Hofmann, the discoverer of LSD, established an actual secret laboratory within a volcano in Mexico. This lab was set up to study and synthesize psychedelics, away from the prying eyes of authorities and amid the unique, inspiring environment. The volcano in question is Popocatépetl. Wait, let me Google this pronunciation, guys. Hold on. Popocatépetl. Yeah, that's what it's called. Anyways, that's one of Mexico's most famous volcanoes. The remote and rugged terrain provided a pretty ideal clandestine location where the scientists could conduct their research without interference. The lab was reportedly housed within the caldera, utilizing the natural formations of the volcano to create a hidden, secure place for their work. The team at this makeshift lab focused on various psychedelic substances including LSD and psilocybin. Their goal was to better understand these substances and their effects on human consciousness. This was a time of great interest and optimism about the potential of psychedelics to unlock new realms of human experience and to treat various mental health conditions. This secret lab contributed to a body of knowledge that would eventually influence the broader psychedelic movement of the 1960s and beyond. However, as government crackdowns on psychedelic research intensified, the operation was eventually shut down. The story of the Volcano Lab remains a pretty fascinating chapter in this history of psychedelic science. It's pretty crazy. Next up, we have Immortality Key. The Immortality Key, the secret history of the religion with no name, written by Brian C. Marikowski, is a fascinating exploration into the potential connections within ancient religious rituals and the use of psychedelics. The book delves into historical, archaeological, and scientific evidence to suggest that some of the earliest religious experiences may have been influenced by entheogenic substances. So it begins with the ancient Greeks and the Eleusinian mysteries, which we already kind of talked about a little bit. These rites, which lasted for over 2 millennia, are believed to have involved a mysterious potion called Kyokien, and the author of the book posits that Kyokien might have contained ergot, a fungus that grows on barley and is known to contain compounds related to LSD. The book then explores how these ancient traditions may have influenced early Christianity. The author investigates early Christian texts, art, and archaeological findings to propose that early Christians might have used psychedelic sacraments as part of their religious practices. This theory challenges the more conventional understanding of early Christian rituals and suggests that the transformative experiences described in religious texts could have been facilitated by psychoactive substances. The author's research also touches on the role of women in these ancient traditions. He highlights how women, often as priestesses or shamans, were key figures in the preparation and administration of these sacred substances. This aspect of his investigation sheds light on the often overlooked contributions of women to early religious practices and the preservation of these esoteric traditions. The Immortality's Key, though, isn't without controversy. Some scholars and historians are pretty skeptical of his conclusions, arguing that while the use of psychedelics in ancient rituals is plausible, definitive evidence still remains pretty elusive. However, the book has sparked renewed interest and debate in the field of ancient history and religious studies, so it encourages further exploration, which is always a great thing. At least we're talking about it. Alright guys, and with that, we're gonna move on into the last layer. Now, I want to be open with you guys, I don't know if you noticed, but I've not been covering every single entry. This iceberg is just huge and it would take forever and probably be boring for both of us, but I'll leave a link to this iceberg in the description if you want to go out and check it. I actually had someone put a link for every single thing in here, so if you want to go research further yourself on things I didn't cover, feel free to go do that in the description. Yeah, I just want to be open with you guys about that. But yeah, let's get into this. So first of all, we're gonna talk about mushroom caves. La Cave des Roches, also known as the Mushroom Caves, is a fascinating underground labyrinth located in the Loire Valley of France. This unique site, carved out of the soft tufa limestone, has been utilized for various purposes over the centuries, but today it is primarily known for its role in cultivating mushrooms. The caves have a history dating back to the Middle Ages when the stone was quarried for building materials. The extensive network of tunnels left behind provided the perfect environment for growing mushrooms. Like, the constant temperature and high humidity levels in the caves create ideal conditions for mushroom cultivation, allowing for year-round production without the need for any artificial climate control. So yeah, I guess this is here because you could grow psychedelic mushrooms here, but they don't. So I don't know why it's here, because they don't grow psychedelic mushrooms here. Alright, next up we have K-hole. A K-hole is a term used to describe a specific type of intense, often disorienting experience that can occur after taking a high dose of ketamine. Now again, ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic that has gained popularity both as a recreational drug and in medical settings because of its anesthetic and rapidly acting antidepressant properties. When someone enters a K-hole, they may feel detached from their body and surroundings, experiencing a profound sense of dissociation. This state can include a range of effects such as feeling like they're floating, having out-of-body experiences, or even perceiving themselves in different realities entirely. Time might feel distorted, with minutes stretching into what feels like hours. This can be disorienting and sometimes unsettling, especially for those who were not expecting such a powerful effect. The sensation of being in a K-hole is often compared to entering a deeply immersive, dream-like state. Users may feel like they're unable to move or communicate effectively, which can be frightening if they're unprepared for it. However, some people seek out the K-hole experience for its intense, introspective, and sometimes spiritually enlightening qualities. It can be a way to explore the depths of their consciousness, similar to the goals of using other psychedelics. But also, obviously, ketamine is not a good thing to do under any circumstance, so don't do it. Despite its recreational use, ketamine is a powerful drug that carries risks, especially at high doses. The dissociation and altered perception experience in a K-hole can lead to dangerous situations if users aren't safe, or if they're not in a safe environment, or if they attempt to perform tasks requiring coordination and judgment, such as, you guessed it, driving. Interestingly, in recent years though, ketamine has been studied for its rapid antidepressant effects. Low doses of ketamine administered in a controlled medical setting have been shown to alleviate symptoms of severe depression, often within hours. This has sparked a new wave of interest in the potential therapeutic uses for ketamine, far removed from its reputation as a club drug, but don't do it. Don't do ketamine. It's very bad, and it's really addictive, and it's not a good idea, okay? All right, let's talk about hallucinogenic fish. Hallucinogenic fish might sound like something out of a tall tale, but there are indeed species of fish that can induce hallucinations when consumed. These fish, often referred to as dream fish, have a storied place in folklore and history, particularly in certain parts of the world. One of the most famous of these hallucinogenic fish is the Sarpa salpa, also known as the Salima porgy. Found in the Mediterranean and along the coast of Africa, the seemingly ordinary fish can cause vivid hallucinations if consumed. Historical accounts suggest that the Roman Empire was aware of its psychoactive properties and it was sometimes consumed for these effects. The hallucinogenic properties of the Sarpa salpa are known to be due to the certain toxins present in the fish's body, possibly acquired through its diet, which includes a variety of algae and plankton. These toxins can affect the human brain in ways that lead to intense visual and auditory hallucinations, often lasting for several hours. Symptoms reported by those who have unintentionally consumed the fish include terrifying and vivid hallucinations, which can be quite disorienting. In addition to Sarpa salpa, there are other species of fish known for their hallucinogenic effects as well. Another example is a certain type of mullet, which have been reported to cause similar psychedelic experiences when consumed. The exact cause of these effects is less well documented, but it's likely related to the fish's diet and the specific toxins that they accumulate. Interestingly, the phenomenon of hallucinogenic fish isn't limited to a single culture, though. Similar stories and experiences have been documented in various parts of the world, so maybe it's a lot more widespread than we kind of know. Alright, this one's gonna be interesting and bad. Let's talk about the family. The 1960s were a wild time for counterculture, and among the most bizarre of these movements was the Australian cult known as the Family. Led by the enigmatic Anne Hamilton Byrne, this group combined elements of LSD, yoga, and UFO beliefs into a strange and ultimately dark chapter of modern history. Anne Hamilton Byrne presented herself as a charismatic yoga teacher and spiritual leader. She founded the Family in the mid-1960s in Melbourne, attracting followers who were drawn to her teachings that blended Eastern spirituality, particularly yoga, with Western esoteric beliefs. At the core of her doctrine was the idea that she was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ and a divine being who could lead her followers to spiritual salvation. One of the most unsettling aspects of the Family was its use of LSD. Anne believed that the psychedelic experiences induced by LSD could bring her followers closer to spiritual enlightenment. She administered the drug during initiation rituals and other ceremonies, often in combination with her intense, trance-inducing yoga sessions. These psychedelic experiences were intended to break down the ego and open the mind to her teachings, reinforcing her control over the group. The Family's beliefs also included a fascination with UFOs. Hamilton Byrne taught that extraterrestrial beings played a role in human evolution, and that she and her followers were chosen to prepare for an impending apocalypse that would be marked by the arrival of these beings. This belief in UFOs added an otherworldly dimension to the already eclectic mix of doctrines, and helped to create a sense of urgency and exclusivity within the group. However, beneath the surface of spiritual exploration and cosmic salvation, there was a much darker side to the Family. Anne Hamilton Byrne orchestrated the illegal adoption of numerous children, raising them in isolated conditions and subjecting them to severe physical and emotional abuse. The children were often drugged with LSD and other substances, indoctrinated with the group's beliefs, and kept in line with strict and cruel discipline. The group's activities largely continued unnoticed until the late 1980s, when a police investigation and subsequent raid brought their practices to light. The revelations shocked the public and led to Anne Hamilton Byrne and several of her followers facing legal action, thank God. Although she was eventually convicted of minor offenses related to the fraudulent adoption practices, Many felt that justice wasn't fully served given the extent of the abuse. It's heartbreaking. Okay, next one is a touchy subject. So let's talk about psychedelics and sexual abuse. Psychedelic therapy is gaining traction as a promising treatment for various mental health conditions. It involves the use of substances like psilocybin, MDMA, and LSD, and controlled substances to help patients access and process deep-seated emotions and traumas. This therapeutic potential is immense, with many patients experiencing good breakthroughs, whatever. However, as with any powerful tool, there's a darker side to psychedelic therapy that warrants serious attention. A concerning issue that's been emerging is the potential for sexual abuse by therapists. The risk stems from the deeply vulnerable state that patients enter during psychedelic sessions. These substances can dismantle mental barriers, leaving patients extremely open and susceptible to suggestion and manipulation. A CBC News article highlights a harrowing case in British Columbia where a former patient reported sexual abuse during her psychedelic therapy sessions. The patient, who was seeking help for past trauma, found herself in an even more distressing situation. The therapist, who was supposed to guide her through her healing journey, instead exploited her vulnerability. This story underscores the critical importance of rigorous standards and oversight in the field of psychedelic therapy. Unlike more established medical treatment, psychedelic therapy is still navigating its regulatory path. This gray area can attract practitioners who might not have the necessary training or ethical grounding, which increases the risk of misconduct. For patients, the experience of psychedelic therapy can be intensely emotional and disorienting. They place immense trust in their therapists, who hold significant power in guiding and safeguarding their journey. When this trust is breached, the emotional and psychological fallout can be devastating, compounding the very traumas that they came to therapy for. So I think it's crucial for the psychedelic therapy community to address these risks head on. This means advocating for comprehensive training for therapists, establishing clear ethical guidelines, and creating robust reporting and accountability mechanisms. Patients should also be empowered with knowledge about their rights and the signs of inappropriate behavior. But moving on from that, let's talk about microdosing causes myocarditis. Microdosing, the practice of taking small, sub-hallucinogenic doses of psychedelic substances, has gained popularity for its purported benefits like enhanced creativity, improved mood, and increased focus. People microdose with substances like LSD and psilocybin mushrooms, often taking these tiny doses a few times a week. While the practice is seen as a way to gain some of the benefits of psychedelics without the intense trips, recent discussions have raised concern about its safety, particularly regarding heart health. One significant concern is the potential link between microdosing and myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart muscle. A post on the Harvard Law Forum blog delves into this issue, highlighting the need for more research and caution in the practice of microdosing. Myocarditis can be caused by various factors, including viral infections and autoimmune diseases, but drug-induced myocarditis is known as its own phenomenon. Psychedelics like LSD and psilocybin interact with serotonin receptors in the brain, but they also affect serotonin receptors in the heart. This intersection can potentially lead to adverse cardiovascular effects, especially when these substances are used frequently over time, as is common in microdosing regimens. The blog post emphasizes that while there are many anecdotal reports of the benefits of microdosing, the scientific community still lacks comprehensive studies on its long-term effects, particularly on heart health. Most existing research on psychedelics has focused on their use in larger doses for therapeutic sessions, not on the smaller doses typical of microdosing. This gap in research means that potential risks, like myocarditis, may not be fully understood or appreciated by those who choose to microdose. For individuals considering or currently practicing microdosing, it's crucial to be aware of these, regular medical checkups, monitoring heart health, etc. But again, I'm not advocating any use of any of these drugs at all, okay? Okay, let's talk about how LSD influenced the discovery of DNA. The story of LSD's influence on the discovery of DNA is one of the more intriguing intersections of science and psychedelics. According to various accounts, including an article by the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, or MAPS, Francis Crick, one of the Nobel Prize-winning scientists credited with the discovery of the DNA double helix, was reportedly under the influence of LSD during one of his most groundbreaking works. Francis Crick, along with James Watson, made the historic discovery of the double helix structure of DNA in 1953. This discovery was pivotal in understanding the genetic blueprint of life, and it revolutionized biology and medicine. The anecdote suggests that Crick's use of LSD played a role in his ability to visualize the double helix structure, which he described as a spiraled staircase of genetic information. While it's impossible to quantify the exact impact that LSD had on Crick's discovery, This story does highlight the potential use for psychedelics to influence scientific and creative breakthroughs. It also brings to light the broader context of the 1950s and 60s when many scientists, artists, and intellectuals experimented with psychedelics in search of inspiration and new ideas. So that's pretty cool, man. I mean, pretty cool. It's still illegal though, still a bad idea, don't do it. Sorry guys, the YouTube bot's gonna be on me for this one. Alright, let's talk about Pont Saint-Esprit, France. The mass poisoning in Pont Saint-Esprit, France is a mysterious and tragic event that occurred in 1951. The small village was thrust into chaos when a significant portion of its population began experiencing hallucinations, convulsions, and severe psychotic episodes. Initially, the incident was attributed to ergotism caused by ergot, a toxic fungus we already kind of talked about. It can infect rye and other cereals. However, over the years, the true cause of the outbreak has been the subject of much speculation and investigation. On August 15th, 1951, residents of Pont Saint-Esprit started exhibiting bizarre symptoms. People reported feeling a burning sensation in their limbs, and many experienced intense hallucinations. Some saw terrifying images of animals or creatures, while others believed that they could fly or were under attack. The outbreak led to 5 deaths, severe hospitalizations, and hundreds of people affected to various degrees. Ergot poisoning, also known as St. Anthony's fire, seemed a plausible explanation at the time. Ergot contains alkaloids that can cause hallucinations and severe physical symptoms, mirroring what the residents experienced. Historically, ergotism has been responsible for similar outbreaks in Europe. Contaminated bread made from ergot-infected rye was believed to be the source of the poisoning. However, as time passed, doubts about the ergot theory grew. In the 1960s, the French government investigated the incident and found that the bakery's grain supply was likely not contaminated. This led to alternative theories, including the possibility of a covert chemical experiment gone wrong. In the 2000s, journalist Hank P. Abarelli Jr. published a book suggesting that the mass poisoning was a result of a secret CIA experiment. According to this journalist, declassified documents indicated that the CIA had been testing the use of LSD and other hallucinogens as part of its MK Ultra program. The theory posits that the CIA deliberately dosed the village's food supply to study the effects of these substances on a large population. But I mean, who knows? He didn't really bring, conclusive evidence, but it makes sense, kind of, I don't know. And with that, we're done with the Psychedelics Iceberg. I really hope you guys like this one. Be sure to subscribe, everything, join my Discord server. I had fun making this, and you guys seem to really like these drug videos, so thank you so much for watching, and yeah, have a great night, guys. Sweet dreams.